All right. Well, good evening, everyone. Tonight is Tuesday, November 14th. This is an advisory meeting. On the topic for this evening, the agenda, we have, we'll be interviewing two candidates for the open position on advisory, 10 minutes each, and then we will be meeting with Chief John Menzer of the Fire Department for about 20 minutes, followed by a proposal for consideration of a strategic planning and master plan update. And then at 8 o'clock, we will be talking to Mr. Troop regarding a presentation on Camp Virginia's special town meeting warrant article. And we'll close things out. So, first order of business, Ann Hurd. Ann, your pleasure. You can stay there. You can come down, whatever you'd like.
I'm used to this. So, I brought a couple things, but I only brought one copy. I'm retired, so I'm not looking for a job, but here's my resignation. I'm so retired. So this gives you some sense of my background, and I just wanted to speak briefly to my experience with town government, which has been extensive over the years, but I've always done it on behalf of a more often than not a company, in terms of stakeholder management, working with boards and commissions, going to town meetings, getting resolutions, getting approvals. And I was sitting down trying to figure out how many cities and towns I had worked with over the course of my year career, and it was like 17 or 18 cities and towns, including the city of Boston and Merrimack, New Hampshire. So 2 out of state, yeah, a lot. But what that has given me is a rare exposure to town government in particular, because out here we have a far more prevalent town form of government. So I've worked with conservation commissions, with boards of selectmen, with planning boards, with any number of these groups, zoning, environmental, to secure permits, and then to put together proposals for the approval, which gave me insight to town government that is probably pretty unusual for somebody who moves into town and just goes to town meeting, if they do that. So that's my experience, particularly with the town of Fulton. I got elected to the board of a library in 1997, and I actually hired Kelly. And then we worked through almost a 9 or 10-year process for a long-range plan for that library, as well as, and you may debate it now, but I haven't been on the board for a while, a degree of budget rigor that the institution hadn't really been able to work out, although the budget was a lot less then, so this was like $40,000.
I'm well aware.
Yeah. But what we did create was quite an astounding institution with very gratifying usage. So I think that has been a success. But that was a process of going to town meetings and get town meeting votes, securing people to engage in the process who had not heretofore been involved as volunteers, ultimately resulting in the opening of the library and the grant. I chaired the capital campaign for that library. We had to raise over $1 million in order to go to town meeting and get approvals. And we did that, which was remarkable because this community does not necessarily have a long history of philanthropy, with the exception of the conservation group. So it was a challenge, and I just stuck with it, and I met some great people, and we were successful. So I'm retired now. I've always been interested in finance. I've managed significant budgets at my work. I was telling Brad that my first exposure to the finance committee was dealing with Wayne Wetzel and asking for more money. And I did my little digital form of my budget, just what you talked about, Ted, here's what our budget was, here's our expenditure to date, here's the variance, here's what we need, and this is how we move it around if you would be so kind. And he gave me my, I don't know, was $10,000 or something. But, I believe in that kind of rigor, and I manage budgets not only for my department, but for major programs at Intel, a lot of them related to the Intel Foundation. So that's sort of my background. So I'm interested in getting involved. I believe in rational budgeting. I believe in common sense. I believe in listening, because listening is a lot more useful than opining ad nauseum, and asking good questions so that I can understand. And I think there's always going to be pressure, there's always going to be trade-offs, but they're really, I think you guys serve an important purpose to look at that and to be able to recommend what's reasonable and affordable, given the constraints that we have, and they're only going to get worse. So that's my background, and whatever you want to ask me, you can ask me, and I'll be honest. I'm nothing if not straightforward, which is a problem.
Not on this board.
Yeah. Questions?
Sure.
Sure.
Could you tell us about a time that you changed your mind about something and how that went, what led to the change?
Oh, God. I think a lot of that had to do with learning more about the situation. So, for example, I worked with the town of Boylston. We needed two zoning bylaw. And they were telling the company one thing and we were advocating another. And after a lot of conversation with not only, key players, but also stakeholders, I came back to the company and said, this isn't going to work. What you really need to do is consider these three things, and within those parameters, we can probably, work collaboratively together. But you just can't come in here like grant-taking Richmond and demand it. It isn't going to happen. So those kinds of things. I did the same thing with regard to working on one of my projects was a 495 interchange at Cimarron Drive. A 7-year project that took 17 years. And then I was working on, what was the route, what was the land taking required, what kind of private sector funding. And that was all iterative. I mean, you have conversations, you have to change your mind, you're not going to get anywhere. I don't know if that's helpful.
Yeah. That's good.
I've been retired for a year, so I don't remember.
The biggest challenge that you see that Bolton's facing, given the situation?
Well, you look at the budget, and clearly the regional school system has made a huge impact on the budget over the years, and it's a constraint. And so you have, extraordinary people doing extraordinary work in town departments, but resources are constrained. So I think that the overall thing would be some, sort of longer window in terms of rational thinking and planning, so that I know you've got a capital plan, right? But also really understanding at what point are you going to be, is debt going to fall off? At what point are you able to take on new? At what point do you be able to, rejigger things? And you have to have that ahead of time, or you're never going to accommodate it. So that's, to me, it's the balancing. And, given the school budget and the limited control we have over that, that's the big thing. And then, you look at other mandates that are going away, and it's going to be tough. Not impossible, but tough.
Yeah, every year it gets more difficult. Gets squeezed.
Yeah.
The school is going to eat 60 to 70%. But the fact of the matter is, open up every single book, budget book in every single town in the state of Massachusetts, for that matter, for the better part of the United States.
Yeah.
And it's 60 to 70%.
And that's pretty standard, but I think the difficulty for us is the two-town approval. So you get to a point where you have very limited ability to influence that. And whatever reason, that's what was done. And so...
It's a regional district.
Yeah, I remember when it wasn't. So I don't know. So I think it's just continuing constraints, and then working with department heads to be really realistic about what we can do.
And I think the department heads have a very good handle on what. I mean, Dawn, they are in possession right now of a budget notice that they are working on submitting their budgets back to us. Yeah. And the opening line is one that has been pretty much standard for the past 8 years. We are asking you, Margie, do you want to quote it for me? We are asking you, level funded. Yeah. So I think they're very well aware, but yeah, I mean, the biggest challenge, as you know, in any large organization is the actual people, and then all the services that are tied to those
Right.
specific people.
Right.
Right? The comp, all the benefits tied.
Right.
And then, you know, there is very little that this board really can control, for various reasons.
Right, and I understand that, and I
Yeah.
see it. The same token, you know, I think you guys have done a lot in terms of having department heads think ahead and be a bit more, there will be occasions when one department gets it appreciably more because the need is there, but another department's gonna have to suffer because there
Yeah.
isn't a lot of flexibility. And just because you've got a level budget in, 2017, does not mean it won't go down the following year. There may be contingencies you have to fit with.
Yeah.
And, I saw that certainly in the funding that I managed for the company. You had to look, and it was all a trade-off. All of a sudden, this became a higher priority, so therefore, somebody had to step back and say, well, we don't need that this sheet, and push it out either.
Yeah.
And I think that's the challenge that you have.
Yeah, because I wholeheartedly agree. It's slightly more difficult in the municipal world.
Yeah.
to
Oh,
take that.
believe me, I know.
To take that
My brother-in-law's on the board of selectmen in Needham, so I hear a
Yeah.
lot about this. So.
All right. Well, any other questions for Ms. Hurd? No?
Okay.
And thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank
I
you.
better put my stuff here. And if I may sit for a little bit.
Yeah, yep.
I'll get back to you. You'll find a great job. Thank you.
Pat Gray?
Sure.
Hello.
Hi, how are you doing? I didn't bring my resume for a couple of reasons.
It's quite all right.
I've already overwhelmed you with enough paper, and you'll see that on the presentation for the master plan later tonight. My qualifications are more in the corporate realm. I've been a manager, an executive of fairly significant corporations. My experience is more from the business world. I'm used to reading business plans, going over budgets from that perspective, a lot of strategic planning, both from large corporations and small corporations. And I almost feel like I have to apologize for being a lawyer, but I do so by saying I'm more of a business lawyer. So I have a lot of passion for managing costs where we can and finding opportunities if we can. That's the role of this committee. It may not be. I have observed in my limited experience with town government to date that there are a lot of opportunities, I think. And actually, to capitalize on a couple of points you discussed with Ann, currently we're running at a 37% rate of control. If you look at 63% being taken up by the school budget, and I believe there may be some opportunities to involve school budgeting process to participate in the planning process along with us. And I think this committee has already started that process, which I would really encourage. Big fan of planning. So again, I agree with the earlier candidate that, and it will be reflected in the presentation for the master plan. It's one of the reasons for having a plan that gives a vision to the town and a guidelines for something that survives your tenure on the advisory committee or the board of selectmen, something to provide guidance to the successors who might be in that role, whether it's the person who left this position or the person coming in. It's something that actually may lead to other opportunities of how you work with the departments and also manage costs. So I'm open for any questions. I've been a participant on the law committee. I understand that if asked to serve on this committee, I might be asked to resign from the law committee. If that's the case, I'd like to volunteer my services to the law committee. There's one matter in particular that I think has cost implications for the town, and I'd like the opportunity to try to manage it. That's their decision. And one philosophy that I've had that served me well in my career was not to assume I know everything. So when I hear you say the department heads really know what's going on, that sends a lot to me. You've been on the planning board, you've been on the advisory committee for a long time. I think before that you were on planning board, right? A lot of the
Capital
Okay.
planning, yeah.
Capital planning, okay. So a lot of the members of this committee have had enormous experience. And I'm looking for an opportunity to serve the town in an official capacity. I'm not sure that the law committee is this official capacity to enable me to help. So rather than go on and on, I really prefer to have you ask me questions and see if there's anything I can resolve. To your
Questions?
satisfaction.
Well, I'll ask the same question, Pat, to you that I asked Ann.
Yeah.
Granted, you've had 5 minutes to think about it, but it's not an
Well,
earth-shattering question.
Yeah.
So just share your thoughts on where we are with the town. You're right. I've been doing this for a while, and I had all intentions of coming on here and going, we're absolutely gonna turn the ship around. And there's so much once you really start digging into it that there's very little. And what we do, and what we ask of the department heads, they're asked to do a lot with what we have.
Right.
So it's been eye-opening for me being on that side of the house and then coming over here. And I'm sure there's a whole mess of people in town that think I have become institutionalized and I need to get the hell out of here.
Get it.
I'm sure that will come soon enough. So yeah, I'd like to hear your point where
Well,
this all is.
To your point, I haven't just been thinking for 10 minutes about it, I've been thinking at least for 5 months about it, because I've been working on an update to the master plan. And I think you're right. You can drive yourself crazy trying to think of ways to solve issues. And so one opportunity is to observe what's going on and to see if there are ways that, I believe strongly in management. So if you're working on a committee, understand the other committee members, understand your strengths and weaknesses, understand your strengths and weaknesses along with those of the administration, and see if there's a way that you can team up and present your guidance to the town in the capacity in which you're asked to serve. So you can decide to either number crunch on the 37% that you've got left over, or you can rake town administration over the coals for spending $10,000 more on a particular line item. But the question is, what impact does it have on the team you've got to work with? In terms of the largest challenge, obviously it is monetary. No matter how you look at it, Bolton ranks as one of the highest, not just the highest tax rates, but also the highest tax assessment for a town of its size, if you take into account home values and a lot of other factors that go into that complicated analysis. So it's complicated, but I think the best thing you can do in a situation in which you feel powerless is to try to manage yourself well enough and also provide as much leadership to that point. A specific issue, and I'll bring it up later with the master plan, one issue is everybody over the age of 55 feels like they have to leave this town. If you don't, I've never had kids in school. But I've been happy to pay the taxes, I can afford it. I like the people I've met in the course of my own research and trying to learn more about the town. But it makes me unhappy when I see a senior who's saying, I've got to move to Acton, or I've got, I'm worried, so senior affordable housing is a hot topic. I'll bring it up later in connection with the master plan. So frankly, so there are all these issues, many of them will play out in the later presentation.
Yeah. Okay.
All I want is the opportunity to help in a way that's not too confining. And so I'm thinking, I really respect what this committee has been doing in terms of financial planning. I couldn't endorse it more. I think it's something that would give the town a feeling of security that's being done. And I guess the only other suggestion I'd have, and I made the same suggestion to the planning board, is if you could try to do a way to truly have the town residents understand what you're doing and all the hours you're putting in, which is pretty significant. Frankly, I'd like to deal with the exhaustion issue involved in committing to town committees. There may be some more efficient ways that we can approach those committees. So I'm looking for an opportunity to help.
Mhm.
And because of my financial background, again, it's more looking at business plans and saying, does this really work? Although, on the other hand, I've been in 5 different industries. I've had to get up to speed quickly on each one. And again, want to say that I don't know everything.
Yeah.
But what makes me a fast learner is that I'll listen to everything you say and try to take it to heart and to the next level. And it might also involve going to state meetings, training, finance people. I mean, I'm not eligible to do that in my current capacity. So anything I can do to help, I'm ready to serve. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So at this point, it's really more of a interview component, and we're not going to take an official vote on anything this evening because it's not in the agenda. So we will take a vote on the next time we're together, which will be December.
Okay, great.
So I apologize for any oversight on that behalf, but it wasn't. I didn't construct the agenda as such, so I was recommended to simply, we can have further discussion later on this evening. But I do want to maintain our track, so thank you, and we'll see you shortly.
Thank you.
Mr. Yes.
Well,
I believe
John's here.
Here we go. Wants to hang outside. Is that it?
I didn't want to disturb him.
You're very nice, I'll tell you what.
Mr. Renzer, how are you, sir?
Very good, thank you.
Margie, how are you?
Hi,
All right.
heard the ambulance going up earlier.
So just for everyone in the crowd who does not have an agenda, this is for discussion on an additional daytime fire EMT staffing for January 1, 2018 through the end of the fiscal year. So what's happening? We haven't even seen you guys yet.
No,
So what's going on?
well, I guess, basically, maybe a month or so ago, myself, Margie, and Don started sitting down to discuss what we were seeing the staff requirements for fire and ambulance for FY19, just to kind of start preparing, that. But to me, it became very obvious quickly that, whatever the need might be in FY19, there's actually definitely a need today for additional staff people in the fire station, not just our call firefighters or EMTs, but someone who actually is staff in the station itself.
So you're right. I mean, the proposal that, what we're talking about getting ready and going for discussing in January is for FY19. This is for FY18. So has something changed since when we were all together and approved your budget from last year?
The whole thing is really driven more based on the fire department's needs. Certainly our daytime coverage has always been fairly minimal, but we've managed to, get through. During the year, due to various reasons, we've lost a number of people who we could count on for daytime response. They've switched jobs or moved or, for whatever reason. So we're kind of down right now to a very low critical level, I would say, as far as people who will be able to respond during the daytime.
And is this to both fire and ambulance?
Mostly for fire. For ambulance, the system always has worked and it's still working well.
Okay.
Where we have Lieutenant Farrell responding to the ambulance and the cadets from the high school.
Okay.
Do you have numbers that kind of flesh out those words?
We have some initial information for you. I didn't want to do a lot of work in getting all sorts of statistics until I find out what you'd be looking for. So I assume this will be kind of a start of the conversation, and we can come back with you and talk some more some other numbers that you specifically want to see.
All right. So the concern is minimal coverage or decreased coverage during the daytime related to the fire relative to what had been taking place in the past.
Yes.
All right. So obviously the concern is something happens from a fire standpoint during the day and no one is available. So the result would be a slow, delayed response to whatever happens.
Correct, and I have numbers that I can show you that.
Has this happened? Have we had any incidents of this where you actually were short-staffed and had to, I don't know, call mutual aid or
Oh,
something?
definitely, yes. I mean,
Yeah.
within the last 3 weeks, I think we've had 2 cases of that.
Okay.
Yes. And the towns, the surrounding towns have been supportive of us for that, but, you know, I don't know how long the generosity, you know, is kind of going to last. So I think we, you know.
Why would their generosity, I mean, is it being generous? I mean, every time they go out, they get paid, right? So what do they care?
No, because they're full-time.
All right,
So
so,
everything around us is full-time.
So the-
So they're paying money
all right.
in their budget.
Yeah, they're already paid. They're just being useful.
But they're leaving their towns uncovered.
Correct, yeah.
And it's industry standard to help each other out. But there's a line.
Sure.
So basically, what we've discussed with Dawn as far as a potential way to try to start dealing with this issue would be the proposal to have, in addition to Lieutenant Farrell, our full-time Lieutenant EMT, to have 2 firefighter EMTs also staffed in the station, paid on a per diem basis, basically, an hourly rate. They would be full-time employees and be per diem employees. And that would give some additional level of coverage to help on a fire call where 3 firefighters now would be able to respond immediately, and then we can fill in the additional manpower that's needed by the call people if or when they show up. And if there is an ambulance call, there would still be 2 firefighters available to respond immediately.
So the proposal is 2 full-time per diem.
2 8-hour shift, Monday through Friday, an 8-hour shift.
Yeah, regardless of how we work it,
Yeah.
basically, so we want to staff 2 more people in-house, 8 hourly. Whether,
Per diem.
Correct.
yeah.
So, Don, help me out here. Benefits?
No.
All right.
Well, hang on.
Wait a minute,
Yeah.
if they go,
So if they're,
No, well, it depends. I mean, what we talked about when we kicked this around was we'd have a pool of people,
yes,
not just like 2 people doing it every day. So we wouldn't have 2 dedicated people working for it, then we would have to benefit them. If we rotated from a sufficient pool, then they would not be benefited.
Now, the last time I believe I was around you guys, I was so kindly invited to an executive session on fire. Has that been resolved?
No,
Oh.
it's not been signed yet.
This has got nothing to do with that.
No.
I wasn't there.
I have a question. I just want to make sure I understand. So were you describing a pretty dramatic drop-off in the number of call firefighters? Is that they're technically just call firefighters that you have a list of their pool right now and they're paid an hourly wage?
Well, over the recent past, the total number of call firefighters has decreased. Right now, we're at a level of about 22, where we have 18 of those 22 are basically trained firefighters, and 4 are newer members who are still kind of going through their training process. But it's more of those 22, it's the more important thing is we have a decreased number of ones who are available during the day to respond.
Okay.
Which is something the ambulance has always had a problem with.
So what would be the pool number, more or less? How would 2 help with this pool? I mean, would it be the 2 rotating? You want 2 at a time, so What's the pool look like? I mean,
Well, so is it fair to say that the two people are, with this rotation concept, are gonna come from the 18 qualified firefighters? Is that the deal? Is that what's happening?
Perhaps some of them would, but I don't think we would be able to fill all the shifts with just from that pool of 18. For two reasons. One is that we'd want to have both a firefighter and EMT person filling that slot, and not all of the 22 are both firefighters and EMTs. So it narrows the pool a little bit more. But I think also just in order to have sufficiently large enough pool to choose from, I think we probably would have to open that pool up to firefighter EMTs from other surrounding towns, other departments.
Of the 18, you mentioned 22 total, 4 are new, 18 are good to go.
Yeah.
Of those 18, how many of those have expressed interest in being part of this rotation? And are they
This has not
EMT?
been discussed,
All right.
with the.
Are they
town as a whole.
EMT certified? And have you thought about the degree of training impact on the budget?
Like I
so
said,
that
not
they
all
could
those
get
18
EM.
are EMTs.
8 are,
Pardon?
maybe 8 are EMTs.
That's probably right.
But if the 18 or 22 are not available on day shift,
Right.
how do they become available on day shift when
Well, they're
I'm confused?
so they're not.
And then-
They're not available necessarily. Like, do I really want to
But they
wake
have-
up if at 4 o'clock in the morning sun goes up? Do I really want to wake up and kill myself, right? And then trash my whole day on my full-time job? Whereas if there's a slightly more incentive where I'm gonna consistently take 2 shifts a week and get paid, right? I might be more inclined to, let me go get extra training and be an EMT on that. And then I might also be more inclined to wake up at 4 in the morning when the call goes off.
Is the shift we're talking about midnight to 8 or 8 to
It's an
4
8 to-
in the day?
It'll be a daytime
A day
shift. The exact hours we still have to
Okay.
work on.
But a fire is gonna
So-
happen whenever
Okay,
demo
But
pleases.
if they're not available now,
But
how do they become?
During the nighttime hours or the other off hours, we do, more of those 22 are in town, in their beds, potentially available. We just have to give them enough incentive to get up and out of bed and to the fire station. Whereas during the day, the people just aren't there, even if they were super motivated, they're just not there.
Super
They're-
If we have 4 new ones, how do we get 4 more new volunteers? I mean, ultimately, this 22 number would grow it enough. There should be people available on days.
Well, the number of, actually, we have, in addition to that 4, we have another 3 kind of in the pipeline. They're just so new, I didn't want to list them yet. But, for every 4 new firefighters that they get that might be available, they're only available during nighttime hours. You might get 1 if you're lucky who will be available during the day. I mean, the availability of
It's tough.
daytime firefighters is very difficult, especially in a town like Bolton.
And this is always something that we've struggled with. I mean, the ambulance has been dealing with that for 30 years, so.
And you can't use
Yeah,
high school.
yeah. I mean, it's a function of moving from an environment of growing up, living, working in town
Yeah.
to sleeping in town, hiking your ass into Boston to work.
Yep.
What are you looking at in terms of cost? Have you got that far yet?
A basic number that we could start looking at is based on the current rate that we would pay a firefighter EMT who fills a shift such as, if Lieutenant Farrell is.
This is before the executive session number that we're not talking about.
Oh,
No, this is numbers are
This
effective
is what,
on that.
what we pay to cover our daytime
Yeah.
full-time.
So it's you can talk about it in public.
Yeah,
Okay.
I can't tell you off the top of my head. I can tell you roundabout, but I can't tell you the
Well,
percent.
that number would be $20.30 for an hour. So if you take that for 2 per diem firefighters, 5 days a week, 8 hours a day, basically, the total would end up being in the neighborhood of $44,300 for the 6 months, January 1st through the end of the fiscal year.
What was that number again? 45,000?
My number is 44,300.
Yeah, I can do the math on that, yeah, up to 12, I can do that.
is that hourly number in line with the rate that we pay the people now that come out on day? I mean, we're not gonna create
It is, and
a
it's in line with what other towns are
disparity
paying
that
also.
creates more problems.
No, so this rate now is what we would pay, so if Dave takes vacation, we cover the shift, and that's what we would
Oh, we
pay. If they
check.
were, yeah.
So what's it look like now? The coverage right now at
That's
the,
what we need, the numbers.
yeah.
Historical.
Tomorrow, 11:30 in the morning,
Mhm.
fire takes place, what's gonna happen?
It depends. So the problem is that we have a lot of people, it's the same with the ambulance, so I feel like I can answer this one, right? It depends, we have a lot of people who work like 24-hour shifts, so they may be around, you know? They may have worked an evening shift, so they're around during the day, but they may not, you know? There's a lot of people who have childcare issues, so.
It's very hit and miss, but basically, right now, the fire happened 11:30 tomorrow morning. Hopefully Dave would be, he was out sick today, but hopefully he'll be back tomorrow, so that'll be one person. And there's 4 other people who typically are usually available during the day for response. So if that's the case, that would be 5 people.
And you're saying on an ambulance situation, that there's more support system because,
Because of that program.
okay.
And just so you know, I mean, we do struggle filling the full-time shift sometimes, so,
Yeah.
you know, April vacation, I may get 3 out of those 5 shifts filled. And the other 2 I have to make do with, or, you know, beg and plead and, you know, or just hold my breath and hope that nothing happens and we would call mutual aid. But that this is something that, you know, we've been struggling with.
Do we have 6 months of historical data that show for a given fire, a given EMT alarm, here's the makeup of the responders. This many are per our program, and this many came from other towns, or just give us a picture of historically, you know, what's been happening, is it on a decline or something?
Yeah.
I mean,
Interested
I
in
understand
all
the
hours
narrative,
or
I'm
just-
looking for the numbers.
Yeah, you looking for all the hours or
Well-
for daytime?
I guess just working backwards, you're talking about having this effective January 1. So when would we need to make a decision for you to implement anything? Because where I'm going with this is like, it might be helpful if advisory submitted like questions to the liaisons for the fire department, and then you could work with your liaison to give us a fleshed out proposal at our December meeting. Because I just feel like like you said, this is the initial conversation. I have a bunch of questions, it sounds like a bunch of other people do too. And I don't think we're gonna get through it all tonight, but maybe by our December meeting, but I don't know if that's too late for you. We're meeting on December 12th.
I mean, we have waiting as far as exactly what would be necessary to do to put this in place.
Well, from past conversations, Chief, tell me if I'm wrong, it feels though there's on average around 2 to 3 house fires in town per year. Is that accurate?
It's certainly no more than that. I mean, those would be minor fires, yes. And we might have a major fire, luckily, we're fairly lucky in Baltimore, that might be,
Yeah.
once every 2 years or so.
So the question is, does the town want to spend $90,000 for an insurance policy, or do we just hope that a lot of our houses don't burn down?
Well, that was a Dave Lindsay thing, you don't remember, with the fire hose. We don't need to put the money into those, because we only have one house that burns down every, how many years, 4 or 5?
So it's not just fire though, so the fire department accompanies the ambulance on every motor vehicle accident. And sometimes that's not necessary, but a lot of times it is. So, if.
So right there, shouldn't it be to, they will accompany when determined necessary? Shouldn't
Well-
that already be put in place?
Well, yeah, but that,
It would be nice if we could do that. One of the, I think the town has seen a lot of benefits going to the regional dispatch. To me, on the fire side, one of the downsides is that, basically, they need to treat all towns as much the same as possible, so they're not dispatching one town different from another. And typically, in most towns, fires are automatically dispatched with ambulance based on pretty much any car accident, even in whether they're needed or not. But they're not really gonna know that until they get to the scene. So our response to car accidents has gone up quite a bit on the fire side.
Yeah. So Chief, are you saying that by moving to regional dispatch, you're not feeling, they're just fleshing out, they're just treating every town the same as opposed to really knowing the need, and as a result of the movement to dispatch, fire trucks are heading out the door on every ambulance call, is that what you're saying? Or
every motor vehicle.
every motor vehicle?
Yes.
And if had left under your control, that would not have been the case, is what you're saying?
I think.
That was not our policy prior to.
Correct. It would be nice if there could be more triage done on calls like that to determine up front, what the.
And you haven't had the opportunity to speak to the
I
dispatch
have,
folks
we've
to say-
discussed that in our operational meetings. But again, most towns don't feel that way. Most towns feel very comfortable, sending the fire truck with the ambulance to the car accident.
But most towns have
Full-time
full-time
people, and it's not
employees,
as much of
so
an issue.
rather than sitting in the station, have to go.
They just go.
So,
All right.
but my point was not that they're going out on motor vehicle accidents. I shouldn't. My point was is that regardless of how many house fires we have, there are calls that they absolutely need to be on.
Yeah.
So,
All right, well, interesting conversation. Yeah, so I think Brian has a good idea. Let's get together with some more questions, and we'll get those to the liaisons, then we'll work on getting back together.
Sure.
And you guys, I guess we'll see you in December and talk more about this. We'll go from there.
That's great.
What is
Was
the
there-
length of training from a new employee to functional employee?
Well, for new call firefighters that we bring in, basically, again, it's going to vary somewhat. We would like to have them go through the basic entry-level training program that the Massachusetts Firefighting Academy offers. And once that program, they offer that twice a year. Usually, they have one in the spring, kind of one in the fall. Once that program starts, it's like a 3-month program. So it could be 9 months, worst case, I suppose.
Up to speed is a significant time.
It is, yes, unfortunately.
And the cost of the training is
Is nothing to the town.
not to the town directly, okay.
Was there anything that you guys are looking for out of this meeting that you didn't get addressed this evening?
No, I mean, certainly, we didn't get a resounding no, so that's good. So we know we can proceed.
You just assumed you. I thought you were going to say resounding yes.
I wasn't expecting that.
So, all right, as long
And
as
I
you
don't say that in a bad way, because I know that you have a lot of questions you're going to want to ask, and tonight,
Yeah, no, this,
It's hard to know what those
I just want to make
questions
sure, I mean, you guys, I know, give an awful lot of your time coming in here. We're now gonna have you traipse back in here in December, and we haven't even started talking about FY19, so we're gonna piss away 3 nights of your life, sitting in here and talking, so. All right.
Pave the way for some of the conversation, right?
we appreciate the opportunity.
Have a nice
Thank you.
evening.
Thank you very much.
Well, I already told my family, get the hell out, let it burn.
You are the,
He's the token.
Yeah. I'll gladly put my house up. Yeah. Have you ever dealt with a house that's had a fire? You'll never get the smell out, just let the friggin' thing burn.
You're on camera.
Well, that's all right. All right, a little behind schedule. Ms. Gray,
And Brad, I'm gonna bring my timer, if that's okay, because I promised 20 minutes.
yes, you'll have 20 minutes. Jonathan, this as well over here. How are you?
Hey, Jonathan, how are you? Right in the cold.
This one for Bob. You asked for a handout, so I'm bringing this
Whoa.
instead of my resume.
Well, I asked for a handout, just like
Only the
something
first page, only the first page.
something to frame the conversation.
Yeah.
That's all.
No, you've got electronic copies of everything but the first page, and all I plan on doing is actually reviewing the first page with you. The issue is the Bolton Master Plan, which was the result of a 2-year effort of a committee that was formed in, Connie, it sounds like you're familiar with the history.
I am.
And I actually spent about 80 hours trying to investigate what I can from the original master plan and evaluate it from a perspective of where are we now with it and what do we need to do with it. And so the intent is really just to help both this committee and the Board of Selectmen, who, by the way, are tasked with the responsibility of implementing the plan, along with the planning board, to consider how to jumpstart it, and here's a proposal. Nothing's written in stone. And again, it's me trying to come up with a proposal to be helpful to the town. So that the overview, the update process would involve a 2-year process with 2 phases. The first phase would involve research on some of the key issues that I'll get into greater depth later. And research which also includes an extensive town survey and an opportunity to present information to town residents. And then the second phase would be the report of the analysis and then posting it on the website so that we can update the master plan that's currently posted there. The reasons for it, I find are compelling. They fall into the ones that I've already given the 2 chairs, which is Jonathan and Brad. And it's both the reasons that I've cited as well as some of the deliverables I envision the committee could deliver as a result of this process. There is a legal statutory requirement, even though it's vested primarily in the planning board. The planning board included in the master plan delegation to the Board of Selectmen and the advisory committee to weigh in on the implementation. The other reason for bringing it to this level is that basically there are certain aspects of the master plan that involve areas that go beyond what the planning board is capable of doing. So whether or not this advisory committee has itself the authority to commission a committee, either you alone or you in conjunction with the Board of Selectmen or in conjunction with the planning board could constitute a committee, but I would think it would be unfair to let the planning board run with it on their own because the issues go well beyond what their responsibilities are. I met with the planning board on September 27th. Frankly, it was a love fest because they've done so much to accomplish what they need to accomplish under the master plan that's existing. And also, thanks to the work of a lot of people who are in this room, actually, they've accomplished many of the capital planning projects, whether it's the town common, the school, the fire and safety building. A lot of that work has been done. The reasons going forward is that there are open issues that remain, and they're tough issues. And there are a couple of issues that are vested in the plan itself that frankly, they're outdated because the time the plan was generated, it was because there was a huge fear of development in town. And as a practical matter, the town has lost its control over comprehensive permitting because of this failure to achieve requisite SHIs, and they aren't realistic anymore. We do have a new requirement for some of the concerns that were addressed and focusing on affordable housing. Frankly, I'd like to shift that focus and maybe focus on what the town could do in a visionary sense, how we could plan community in the future to address our senior housing problem. And I can get into that in greater detail. So the strategic issues really go beyond the planning board. And frankly, as a taxpayer, they involve issues that I'd like to weigh in on. And I'd like to do it before a town meeting. In my experience, town meetings have been contentious. And it's not the opportunity to explore in-depth big issues with the due consideration they deserve. How are we taking care of our seniors? What is the real impact of open space purchases on our finances? What should we be doing with open space? Should it be mixed community? I mean, is there a way we can enter into partnerships with developers? And I've been doing some independent work trying to see if there's something I can do from the private sector to see if there's a way that we can also offer some partnerships. But these issues are all beyond the scope of what the planning board can do. The deliverables, I think, if you decide to proceed with this in connection with the Board of Selectmen, is that I think we'd have an updated master plan that you'd post on the website and it would update. I mean, as a taxpayer, I look at the master plan, I realize this is done in 2005. And there's a lot of information that makes it harder for me to understand where we're at today. And so I'd like to help that effort, and I'd like to save everybody else the 80 hours that I spent trying to understand it, to see if we can do something about updating that information. Second one would be this comprehensive survey to extend among residents, and I'd like to reach out not only through the mechanisms that the town clerk has utilized, but also those that are available through groups like Bolton Local, with whom I'm very impressed. I'd actually like, to the extent the bylaws allow it, I know there are anti-solicitation rules and all that, but frankly, I'd like to reach out to former selectmen, other people who, for whatever reason, don't have the time to sit on a committee, and might have perspectives on how do you think strategically about where the town is going and how can we create a roadmap for the town and the committees and the town administration that are part of it. Something to give a guide map. So there's that comprehensive survey, and then at the same time, I think that survey would also be used to update residents on the current status of some of the issues that were addressed in 2005. The third is comprehensive research and analysis of the key issues. Tax moderation is on the top of the list, and then I clumped together a lot of issues all together. There's affordable housing, senior accommodations, planned multiple use neighborhoods. The third is, I did read the open space and recreation plan. That plan, 150 pages long, is very, has a lot of priorities. And as a finance person, I look at it and I say, help me, put a budget on this. Or what are the priorities and how much is it going to cost and how do we prioritize this 20-page list of priorities? So, and legally, the OSRP is subject to the master plan. So the fact that the OSRP is being updated now brings another reason for why we should be updating the master plan. And we should also, one of the deliverables would be to get the Conservation Commission to work with planning and other capital requirements.
Jesus, all I did was take a quick look.
I know, no, I'm saying anything you say, Grant, really. But I lost my timer, so if I'm over, I'm going over time.
Don't worry about the timer.
Okay,
I
great.
gotcha.
So, let's get these issues out in public, not just a town meeting. Let's have an opportunity to be able to vet them, provide good concrete research, and let everybody who has an opinion or a desire to participate and understand what our some of these issues and what's the town position? What's the guidance we need to running the town for that purpose? So,
And I probably should know this, but at the risk of, I'll step up and say I don't. Where are we with the master plan? I know,
hasn't been, it's just this work that since it was delivered in 2000, in August of 2006, approved by the planning board in 2007, calls for an updating every 5 years or 10 years. And then, so it's due for updating.
yeah.
But in addition, because there are a lot of other things going on in town that implicate all the issues in the master plan, and it's still up there for updating.
Yeah, no, I know at one
it's
point,
late, you
it
know.
was a couple years ago, this committee approved money, I believe, for it to be updated. But then, no, I'm thinking the,
I'm thinking about
That's the open
There
space
there are a
plan.
lot of
the open
different
space
plans.
plan.
So I'm hoping that, so this is the working copy I prepared of the master plan, and I don't want it to intimidate anybody. And again, I harken back to what I said before, I don't know everything. I'm just one resident who felt a commitment to try to understand the town better. And so I figured, okay, rather than sit on a committee, I'm gonna spend this time and research and talk to as many people I can, and this is what I generated. So it's a starting off point, but God knows I'll go crazy if I keep going with this without, having other people to talk to about it and seeing where can we advance it to get to the next place. So in addition, the other deliverables are whatever this committee decides. It's, again, I don't have ownership over this. Frankly, I've gone through cycles of being sick of it, frankly.
yeah, no, I
And
think you give this committee just more credit than we can take. I mean, we're here to just hang out and talk about budgets, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I mentioned we don't get to create committees, and that's why I said, let's make sure the selectmen are here.
I appreciate
Um,
it, yeah.
And, yeah, we have made a point, and, Brian brought this up at the last meeting, that we have liaisons. I think you heard us talking about the fire department. We have liaisons to each of the department heads where, we can act as a resource. But at the same time, we need to make sure that we're communicating back and forth. So case in point, we talked a little bit on the phone a month or so ago. Planning board, yeah, I mean, they bring forth a slew of warrant articles that, written by a lawyer, no offense, impossible to understand.
Yeah,
And that's the extent of what we hang out with the planning board, right?
right.
So we do need to have, a greater understanding of planning and things like that.
Right, so here's an example. The planning board, for example, still charges or asks developers to consider affordable housing because it's in the bylaws, and they are doing a fantastic job. I'm really impressed with the work they're doing. If the developer will have an option to pay a fee in lieu of instead of selling the requisite number of affordable housing units because it's less viable for the developer. That money, from what I understand, and I'd love to verify this, is going into a pool, and they're waiting for it to collect, enough sufficient funds to actually grow into something that could be applied to senior housing, affordable housing, which I think is a fantastic idea. But people in planning need guidance from the other committees. They're putting in, 2 3-hour meetings a month and interim time. They're putting a lot of work. That's a kind of issue that if I understand there's a problem in town about senior housing, I like the idea that we're trying to solve it in a way, but nobody knows about it. So what you're doing is managing finances, and I see that as an opportunity, a funding opportunity. But going back to what I was trying to suggest earlier, that there are opportunities for us to be able to create synergies if there's good management and cooperation among committees. So that's just one example. But I think there are others. Not to say it's something to resolve everything. But so in these materials, I don't expect you to read them, but if you are curious, there's an email that goes into more detail about why we do the master plan, why the advisory committee would be involved. Thank you for the opportunity and for inviting the Board of Selectmen. Everyone, it's, your time is precious. I really appreciate it. And so I think it's important. And, you know, some towns put them on the shelf, other towns take them really seriously. I think it's right for Bolton to consider it and take it seriously and see if we can do something about it.
So the idea that you're proposing, because on the agenda it says consideration for a proposal for a strategic town planning master plan update. And I don't know if it's still the case, but at one point, I think I saw an email or is in a conversation I had with you about forming a committee. So I presume you'd want to be part of that committee.
I'm not sure. I would, and I think you raise an excellent point. Who's on the committee is going to be critical to deciding the success, and it all depends on what our goals end up being. I've become so close to this, and again, as I said, it's not intended to be a Bible. I'm not trying, I did it because I felt I was responsible for understanding the town better. At the same time, I'm looking for a meaningful way that I can contribute to the town humbly, you know, and, you know, trying, because I'm very sensitive to how much time volunteers are putting in to the work of the town. And if there's an opportunity where I can make that better and advance that program forward, please find me a role how I can do it. I don't know enough people in town yet to figure out who do I want on the committee. I know some of the criteria. I certainly do a lot of the legwork. But I basically had my head in the sand for 20 years, you know, or 15 years. And I'm trying to get to know enough people in town. So I need feedback from the various committees to say, okay, what do we want to do with this proposal? Who do we think would be good to put on this committee? And would Pat be a good person to put on that committee or not? I'll go either way, depending on what you think the skill set is. I think anyone that has any experience with financial planning, strategic planning, corporate communications, understanding how to communicate, and voter engagement, but with a high emphasis on what you all do, which is managing everything and coming up with recommendations that are going to be sustainable for the town and cost effective. So that would be my own preference, but I leave it to you.
I have a question. So I just want to make sure I understand procedurally, if the planning board decided that they just wanted to do a very sort of conventional update to the master plan, they have the statutory authority to go ahead and do that. They can either create a committee to do it, they could delegate it to our town planner. But what you're proposing, because it's sort of a more expanded planning endeavor, you're basically asking the Board of Selectmen and potentially us to be involved, contribute resources. But is it your understanding that the actual formation of that bigger, more comprehensive committee is a responsibility of the Board of Selectmen and Planning Board to constitute, because we can't?
It's, I didn't come to a conclusion that you can't, and I wouldn't say, there's nothing I found that precludes you from the authority to do so. And I don't know what the risk would be if you did so. However, because of the nature, clearly the Board of Selectmen have the authority, the Planning Board have the authority. I'm also trying to look at it from a practical perspective, that the Planning Board is so focused on Planning Board issues, and a good chunk of the issues involving the town, if you're talking about affordable housing, well, there's an Affordable Housing Trust and a committee, separate committee for that, but they do so much work. I'm concerned that they would be overwhelmed with this. And what I would like to do is to make it something that we can all agree on operating principles, and that it would be a standing agenda item on the Board of Selectmen, if possible, standing item for reports on the master planning, or the advisory committee as necessary. So the town planner would be given a role, not, and I think how the town, I don't want to speak for Erica, but in the meeting with the planning board, Erica was happy to see that I'd done a lot of the legwork, but she needs guidance. She's not a taxpayer. She's a highly capable town planner, but how she learns is she figures out what the town of Lincoln is doing, or the town of Northborough is doing, or whatever. And I think this is an opportunity for residents to come together. I see it as also a way of bridging consensus on a lot of key issues. And if we assume that responsibility and find a vehicle to reach consensus in a lot of these, or an agreement on principles about how we would address certain issues in town, whether it's the purchase of open space, or it's the dedication of resources to consider how are we going to moderate taxes, or is there an opportunity for us to assist in the planning of a senior living community? I'd like to present that forum. So you have more experience in town management than I do. I'm actually asking your help and advice and guiding me to help you with the proposal to make it better. To see. But as a resident, I'd like to know the answers to all these questions. And a taxpayer. Taxes, when you add up all the taxes you pay, it gets to be pretty high. So I kind of feel, I really want, I think our taxpayers are entitled to have the opportunity. And they may not have the time to sit on committees to find out the answers to these questions. And I don't know if sitting on a committee answers all the questions. But they can start.
Yeah, but I think I understand what you're getting at. I mean, it would be, to me, it would make sense to have, if this committee is formed, someone from planning, someone from us, someone from the selectmen. However, we are, I don't profess to be a selectman, but I feel as though I have a pretty good idea on the time constraints that they're in. And so to ask them to say, do you want to be part of another committee?
Right.
And likewise here. So I would say those three groups, the three critical groups that you described, it's almost like we got to get other people.
I know. Yeah.
So.
And I'm sympathetic to that. Particularly, I was more sympathetic because there are only 3 selectmen. That's why I thought, okay, well, advisory might be a better vehicle. And I know you're going to, so I'm not saying don't do it during budget season. But the irony of this whole thing is that you all have the knowledge. I mean, you've got more experience with this town than anyone. And so the idea was form the committee, have liaisons. But for me, like, for example, I have no authority to do anything. I'm sort of this lost person in the wilderness trying to find a home where I can
Well,
help.
this all derives, really, the authority comes
Yeah.
from the selectmen.
Yeah.
And, I mean, I agree with Brad, I don't know if our 3 selectmen are anxious to join another committee themselves. You also haven't mentioned the Concom. I was once on the Conservation Commission when the last outdoor recreation use, whatever that thing is.
OSRP.
Yeah, was formed, and boy, that took a lot of time. And actually, we had one member who did all the work because he had lost his job.
Yeah. That's the OSRP,
Yes.
which is done this year as well. But this is in addition, this is the
Right.
master plan. Yeah.
But the two have to,
Match.
should match.
Yeah. So
Before we close, I just want to, we do have 3 selectmen. Any comments that you guys would like to weigh in? Any questions that you may have while Pat is here?
Sure, and I think, well, obviously, the master plan is due for a refresh. So I think it's the timing is right. It really is the selectmen that can authorize the creation of a new committee. So it really would have to come through us. So typically you have to create a charter, you have to advertise, because you just can't pick people, you have to advertise. So I think, they would figure out what the goal is, and, obviously the planning board has their specific charter on maybe portions of it, and they can contribute, but if there are additional overarching items that this committee could look into, because there's probably some mechanical things, in the master plan that have to be looked at, but you've addressed many of them. So I think probably it would make sense to have, another session to talk about this a little bit more, or digest some of this, but I think what we really need to do is come up with a charter and what the goals are, and then advertise and, you know, to your point, there's a lot of stuff here, maybe we can't do it all in one shot, maybe we pick, you know, the top 5 things, and we do those first, and then we'll take the next top 5 things. But, you know, the plan definitely needs to be updated, it's due.
Wow, thank you.
It's due.
And that's important.
I'd just say, one of the reasons it's important is that a lot of state grants require a master plan. They want to see that the community is behind a grant that we're applying for, that it's meshing. One of the things I wonder is if there are technical assistance grants. We've had these for other efforts, like updating the planning bylaws. We have a technical assistance grant for that. So I just wonder if we can look for a grant, somebody from a state agency who could help kind of lead the effort and make sure we're, you know, following best practices.
Wow. Great. Well, knowing the time you've already spent on town issues, I can't thank you enough for taking on yet another project. I appreciate it.
Well, thanks for putting this together.
If I can help in any way, let me know. And the only one request I do have is that I'd like to get back to the planning board on some level, if you don't mind, Stan, and Board of Selectmen. I'll report to them that the Board of Selectmen is taking it under advisement with the advisory committee.
Sure.
Okay, thank you. Great. Sorry, I went over 2 minutes.
That's all right.
Okay. And thank you for your time.
Nice work.
Thank you very much.
All right. Ken, sorry for a few minutes late.
No reason. Thank you.
How are you this evening?
Very well. Thanks for seeing us. Let me start by mentioning that there are 2 other people on the group that are here. Laura Roberts on this side and Noel Dill in the back. They can
You guys are welcome
chime in
to come down if you'd like.
Yeah, if they want to move down, that would be fine. So this is the principal article in the special town meeting. We appreciate you having us in, and I've already provided you with a lot of information, so I guess part of it would be a question to you of what you would like to talk about or what you want to know. My assumption is that some of what you want to know has to do with what the numbers are, and so I'm prepared to discuss those with you, but if there's anything in particular that you'd like to know, or if you think that we ought to take a look at any of the background information on what the project is about or whatever, we can certainly do that. But, I know your time is precious as well, so how would you like to have us proceed?
Yeah, so, we're looking at the warrant article here. It's for $1,050,000. I think what would be helpful is, there's been a lot of numbers thrown around, this number, and then there's a grant number, and then, what does this number represent?
Sure.
The numbers involved in the initial analysis or, initial costs associated with the property, and then ongoing costs on an annual basis.
Right. Okay.
I think that would be helpful.
All right, well, let's cover the borrowing costs first. So this is the number that's in the, and I've got a couple of others here if people would want to have them. So the 2 numbers that are being voted on at the town meeting are the borrowing for $1,050,000 and the closing cost for $27,700. Now, the warrant says $17,500, but at the last selectmen's meeting when they set the town meeting and went over the warrant, the treasurer had some additional borrowing information that needed to be included in there, so we'll actually move that article at a higher amount. And we can go into the details of that if you want as well.
Mm-hmm.
But if the grant is awarded, which is not impossible by the time of the town meeting, but definitely by the end of the year, the net would be $677,700, of which 650 then is the amount of the borrowing, and the 27.7 would come from free cash because that's closing costs. The principal and interest is $78,000 a year, and that's $65,000 for 10 years. And then, as you know, the way that the interest works on those things is that it's on the declining balance. So the 78 is going to go down, and the treasurer would like us to use 2% as the interest rate for that, which is $13,000, which gets you to the 78. So that's the cost. It's
Okay. And the 1,050, that's hard and fast, right? That's the number that we're expecting, or could it?
no, that's what's in the warrant.
Okay, so it could be less.
Could be. We might know something later in the week. We might not.
So you're saying it could be more?
I doubt it.
All right. So
Well, no. In fact, it couldn't be. It really couldn't be more. It's whatever is in the warrant, or it's something different.
okay.
And we have no control over that. That's in the selectmen's hands at the moment, and
All right.
and we may know later that there's a new number, and we may not.
Okay.
So we'll know by town meeting, but
All right.
right now we don't know any more than what's here.
So as of right now, the only difference is from the warrant article, 1,050, we have to account for the closing costs of 27.7.
Right. Instead of the 17. That's right.
And also, as the treasurer highlighted, we have to account for the borrowing costs.
Mhm.
And that's included in the 27.7, and of that 27.7, 6 is the initial however many months of interest, $6,000 is interest that's included in that 27.7. And this is obviously the decision they would make later, but what Don described that the treasurer was talking about was that they would have a way with existing debt instruments that they have in hand to essentially cover the borrowing until July. And so that's what the $6,000 of interest would do. Then the 10-year bands would kick in fiscal 19, that would be the $78,000 a year. Now, you'd have to get the details from that office, but that's what I at least interpreted to be the information that they provided.
So this is the scenario to acquire the property.
Right, and the tax impact of that, which I have in this sheet, is 8 cents on the tax rate, or 39.29 for the average tax bill, the 497,000. So that's so those are the acquisition costs.
All right. And then, any questions on the acquisition costs that, as Ken has laid out here?
No, I just noticed it's different from what you had sent us earlier.
Correct.
All right.
Yeah, it's updated based in, and one of the reasons that it's different is because when numbers were put together in the spring in preparation for the grant, the assumption used from the previous treasurer was 1% interest. But the current choice is to have 2, and so that obviously increases the amount of the...
It's fair, I mean, Fed raised, Fed hiked in June, we'll hike next month.
Right.
All right. Okay, so now let's, if no questions there on the acquisition, how about like startup costs? Like, so the town has acquired this piece of property. Take us through the various costs that we might need to deal with in terms of taking the environment from what we just purchased to a situation that we need, that we are in a position to evaluate this, you know, to get it available for usage. And then, which I think is, I classify that as a startup scenario, and then tell me what you're anticipating from an annual, I think I maybe saw something in here, from an annual perspective, ongoing every year.
Well, I don't have that. I have the old stuff that said 30 and then with everything 43, right?
Are you guys in agreement with like a startup
Well, at the
scenario and an
beginning,
ongoing?
But this is the thing. So if you read initially, you say 30.
Well, that was several months ago.
But then on the same email, same material, towards the back, you have 43.
Right.
So I don't understand,
The,
why would you say operating budget here and then, you know, it's just a
Well, it was a-
little misleading, because as I'm reading through it, I'm thinking 30,
well,
and then I see 43, and so,
I think I sent you 7 documents, and they, in some cases, had different dates. As an example, one of the things that I sent you was the grant application. The grant application was dated in July.
yes.
That had certain information in it. I don't remember if it had operating costs in it, but it definitely had some closing costs in it. And then there were some other things around that time, and I also sent you some more recent things, so kind of and it's been evolving as we've learned more and as we've thought things more. We had an open house, had a lot of people there, and one of the inputs that we got from some people was, why you should make sure to include lifeguard costs. The $30,000 didn't have lifeguards in it at all. Now, I've had a lot of people at the most recent open house saying, oh, you don't need lifeguards, let's just have this be open swimming.
Wow,
The
and that
43
reliable?
Well, I don't know, so the 43 has lifeguard cost in it as well as
Right.
as the other. So it's a matter of their evolving and being updated.
Well, you see, that's the thing, as it evolves, is it gonna continue to evolve? Seems like every time it evolves, it's more money that I see. I don't know.
Well, I think what would be helpful, is it fair to say, Connie, what would be helpful from a compelling case, Ken, to assist the town on deciding should we not buy this, is, you know, laying that out, like, here's what we see
Well,
these
and-
costs
and, you know,
being.
these questions are helpful, because if we have these questions, maybe somebody on town floor might have them as well. And if I like,
Sure.
if it's a devil advocate's question, I apologize, I don't mean
No,
to
no, I
sound
think
like
it's
that,
good.
but I do see
don't-
a couple of things in here that I do want a question for, because in one place, the SVT is responsible for the trails, and then further on in a later document, they may be responsible for the trails, not that they are. It could be involved in being responsible for it. And then on this page, it is, they are maintaining the trail system. So what does that mean to me? It means, are they maintaining the trail system saying, we're mapping this out? Or are they maintaining it, clearing it, you know, making sure that it's usable? I don't know, because if that's the case, then it's money, right? Much more money for us if they don't maintain it and just we maintain it, or is it a collaborative thing? That, you know, it's those kind of things in here I have questions about, and I'm not sure if anybody else is gonna
Well,
catch into that.
let me take, but before we go, I have some details here that I'll give you, but before we go into those, I wanted to cover 2 things, I guess. One is that what we're doing is acquiring a piece of land that has long-term usefulness, and that if it's not bought, it'll basically go to houses. And so it's really, I mean, yeah, there could be an in-between, but really for this town meeting, it's a black and white issue. You either protect this land and be able to use it, or you don't. Now, you're asking about startup costs. Well, you don't really have to spend any money to use the land. You could go swimming there, you could go boating there, you could ice skate there if the ice is hard enough. You can walk on the trails there. Now, we do have to do some cleanup, there's no question about that, but that doesn't have to cost money. That's just people pulling logs off of, dead logs off of the hillside and things of that sort. The parking lot does not need to be maintained, it does not need to be gravelled, it's perfectly fine the way it is as a field. The driveway is very passable, in fact, it was made even more passable because they had a slew of logging trucks going in there. So it depends on how quickly the town decides that it wants to get to whatever end state it wants to get to. The end state may well cost some money, but you can budget it, you can schedule it over a period of time, you can figure out how far you want to go with it. It can also be based on how people use it. So if you get a huge demand for example, having company parties or family birthday parties or family reunions or weddings or whatever it is, those can be money makers. and they can be certainly popular. And they might have some needs for some things that simply going in the water and swimming wouldn't.
That's providing the
And
water.
so it sort of depends on how you want to use it. If you want to separate out what would it cost for people to be able to go onto the property and use it in the spring after the closing occurs and the leaves come out, my answer would be that it wouldn't really cost anything. Now, that isn't to say you shouldn't have a budget, because I think you should have a budget for 19. And we propose that there be some kind of part-time labor associated with oversight. Let me give you this, let me mention one other, I said I wanted to make two things, let me mention the other one. My suggestion in this is that if the land is purchased, that the selectmen form a committee to manage the property. And this has a lot of precedent in other towns. Westford has a large camp there, and they have a multidisciplinary committee that works across different agencies in the town. And so I would suggest setting up a management committee. You'd probably have somebody from Parks on it, you'd have somebody from Conservation on it, you'd probably have somebody from the Bolton Conservation Trust, you might have somebody from one of the scout troops, who knows? I mean, and then you would just have volunteers like me or whatever, just for people who want to help out with the thing. And the first thing that committee would do, it seems to me, is to really sit down and figure out for like a 5-year plan or more where you want the thing to go. Now, they want to get a lot of input. We have a survey out on the street now. Now it's just getting out, so it's not that public yet, but that kind of asks people how they use current properties and how they might want to use it. And you'd probably want to do more of that and really get the public involved in deciding how they would want to use it. And then once you did it, so that group could figure out that plan and figure out what fees they were going to charge for the things they would want to do, figure out the policies and procedures that needed to be in place to run the thing, what the hours of operation would be or whatever it would be, oversee whatever contracts that they had for maintenance and that sort of stuff. Now, I think you would want to have an employee of some sort, a part-time employee probably, who would be involved in some of that, who would oversee the budget, who could do coordinating of the maintenance that gets done, whether DPW would do that or not. Now, we've assumed in all of this that it's all contracted out, but maybe not, who knows. But you'd have a person who could do that. And if over a period of time, you got a lot of uses, so that you had a lot of families coming in, a lot of companies coming in, you would need to have somebody schedule it. So the person would maintain a calendar and could plug people in and things of that sort, get the money, bring that in, turn it into the treasurer, manage the budget and those kinds of things. Now, if that really became over a period, now that isn't going to happen by next June.
No, of course not.
But over a period of years, it could potentially become a big deal. And if it did, then probably that person is going to need additional hours. If it really becomes a big deal, and you've done a good job of setting up fees, then there'll be a good opportunity to have the land help pay for itself too. So yes, you'd have costs. Yes, they would probably increase, but there might be offsetting work and labor and all of that sort of stuff to do it.
I got a question about what are the restrictions on the grant? Like, I know you said in here that, and the only thing I read was that it's open to the public, that's of course not a restriction, but that the buildings, if there are new buildings built, they have to be used for parkland activities,
That's our understanding, yes.
right?
Right.
So is a wedding a parkland activity? I mean, I'm just asking. I know you can put a tent, which is great, and then, so would you
Yes,
be
I
able to have private things if it's a public place?
Yes.
You can?
Yes. Yes.
Those are the
I
things.
think the distinction would be that you wouldn't, on that parcel of property, that parkland parcel, you wouldn't be able to build a new town hall, as an example. But you could build a concession stand to support the activities that are going on there. So the people who are swimming or the people who are playing badminton or whatever there were. You could build more cabins if you wanted to do that. You could repair the cabins that are there. You could tear down ones if you didn't want to have them there. So anything that is in the realm of active recreation and what is allowed in parks, as opposed to what's the passive recreation that's allowed in conservation land, is what you would do, and that's the only restriction that you have. And I think that plans of that sort probably would have to be blessed by the state. I don't think
Well, it
that.
says that they have to overlook all those.
Yeah, and so I don't think that would be a serious
Their
problem, but I
response time
think
would be
that,
quick
but I think that's
overall.
probably what they would do, would be to,
Did-
they would have to approve that sort of thing.
When you were working with SVT, or the lady from SVT, did she give you an idea of what they look at as far as the activities that you can do? I mean, they seem like they're pretty well versed in this
Yeah,
kind of
the
stuff.
kinds of things I mentioned are things that they've said would work out okay. And I'm really confident that anything that is currently there would be allowed to continue to be there and be expanded within reason as long as it's meeting the outdoor recreation intents of what's there.
I guess what bothers me is that anybody can play, but we have to pay. Been my motto all week.
Yeah.
But the being public, I have a,
Well,
I love
but
the
think
land.
about the fact that virtually every piece of land in Bolton is public, that's part of town-owned land. All the conservation land, the public goes on and nobody keeps track.
well, time
The
out.
fields, people can go on and nobody keeps, I mean, it shouldn't be an issue. And if it is an issue, then in a way, I guess, that's a success, because if it becomes an issue, then it becomes an issue because a lot of people are using it. Let me tell you a story about Bedford that I heard the other day. They have a man-made pond there near the VA, and it's smaller than, quite a bit smaller, I think, than Little Pond, but it's for swimming. And it was open to the public, and they charged people to get in. And a lot of people from Billerica and Chelmsford went there, in addition to people from Bedford. And they made gobs of money off of it, more than paid for all of the rehab that they needed to do on it, and upkeep and things like that. Bedford people began to complain that it was too crowded, and so they stopped allowing the people from out of town to come in, and so now they're several $100,000 in the hole for what they do. So you can be a victim of your own success, I guess. But I think that sort of thing could be regulated in the policies and procedures that you set forward and in the fee structure that's set up. Now, the woman from the state wrote something recently about a fair fee policy, I think was the term that was used, which she said fair meant that you couldn't charge more than twice from somebody out of town compared to somebody in town.
That's all the same.
So in other words, you couldn't gouge them necessarily, but you could do more. And we've certainly seen other towns where they charge more for out-of-town residents than not. There's a pond in Sherborne where town residents can buy season passes, and out-of-town residents can apply for a lottery. And X number of out-of-town residents are drawn that are allowed to come, and I believe that they pay more. I don't remember for sure, but
This
it's
could be
all
another
something that
employee though, because somebody's got to collect the money, right? Or stand at
Well,
the
it would-
gate, or...
it would be, that would be one of the things that employee would need to do, no question about it. Now, the way in which that is administered, I think, is to be determined. That it might be that there's somebody in the town hall, especially initially, who needs more hours, or wants more hours, or could get more hours, who could do some of that. And then if it grew beyond that, then you might need a separate employee. What we were in the Parks and Rec last month, they're thinking of employment, could combine that, have the same person do some of the same things on some of the different lands. There are a lot of different ways that could be done. But I think, I think it's something that can be worked into. Now, what we used in this, for our $10,000 estimate for the part-time labor, was 9+ hours a week at $20, at $20 an hour.
Planner.
Well, I would call it more of an overseer, okay? I think that it would be a person who does, it's an administrative job, certainly, because it would be somebody who collects the fees and does the scheduling and that sort of stuff, but would also be the person who would drive over to the camp to show a bride around as to where she would want to locate her tent and other things of that sort, and talk with her about what arrangements could be made there. And it would also be somebody who might go in on Monday and check out and see how some group that camped on Sunday did, and make sure that things got cleaned up or whatever it was. So I think it's a varied qualification sort of person, not just a planner and not just a scheduler, but somebody whose job would change as the use of the property would change. Now, the 9 hours, it seemed to me, was not an unreasonable number to use, because that was year-round, and I would assume that a person would do less in the winter than they would do in the summer. They probably are working a lot in the summer because they might be needing to go there a lot and spending more time on maintenance and things of that sort. In the wintertime, it's probably upkeep and maybe scheduling stuff and maybe making sure the ice is okay, or that the plowing gets done into the parking lot so that the people who want to snowshoe can get in there, or something like that. And that could grow as it might need to grow in the future.
Yeah, I can see that.
Can I take a question?
Yeah, okay. Go ahead. I'll let
Mr. Sagansky.
Where I'm having a problem with tonight's presentation is that when we're talking about acquisition costs, it seems to me that the park grant is included, but when we're talking about costs after we possess it, the park grant is excluded.
Correct.
The park grant, if you go to the park grant website, is very clear that the park grant program is targeted primarily toward urban areas for restoration of playgrounds in areas such as that. And the key word here is urban areas. For example, the normal grant applicant is a town or a city with a population over 35,000.
That's correct.
All right? So when you accept a park grant, you are then accepting a bunch of conditions. For example, parking for 100 cars must be paved.
Right, we have that.
Okay? That's half an acre of land that's paved, right? Half of a football field. If you want to check that, you can go to the high school, and the big parking lot on the left side has exactly 200 spaces counted out there. You then go to Google Maps and you look at that side of the high school versus the football field, and they're just about the same size. Furthermore, all the trails have to be paved because ADA compliance is important. And from page 8 of the grant application, I will read, the town signed the community compact with the Commonwealth pledging to increase ADA accessibility, which will be carried out on the property, and implement the Complete Streets program, which, when implemented, will provide walking access from the property to the town center. There will be a paved sidewalk from the town center to Camp Virginia. That is in the grant application that has been submitted to obtain this grant. This will be a monument, Bolton's monument to asphalt.
Well, my comment is that I don't believe that there's a requirement for paving of the parking area. And we've set aside the parking field and identified a number of spaces along the driveway that we believe meets the 100 space requirement. And I'm not aware of any requirement in any of the criteria that means that all trails have to be paved, and there's certainly no intention of doing that. If they determine that we're not an urban enough area and that the purchase is not to their liking, then I suppose they won't give us the grant, and either that'll end it or the town can decide what it wants to do. But I think all of our interpretation and all of our discussions with the people who run that program are not as severe as the restrictions, Bob, that you're talking about. So
just for argument's sake, for one hot second, let's take the paved parking lot of 100 spots off the table and the trails. Are you aware and are you in agreement with Bob of the sidewalk from Camp Virginia to the center?
No. If that was said in the grant application, fine, but they're not approving, what they would be approving is the purchase of the land, not anything else. And so that could be viewed as a long-term goal or whatever it is, but I don't think the purchase of this land has anything whatever to do with the Complete Streets program or the compact that was signed with the state. That's 117 and other things having to do with that, and I don't see that. Now, if the state has a set of criteria, and Bob is absolutely correct that it's aimed at urban communities greater than 35,000. We were able to qualify to submit, and we weren't rejected out of hand. And we qualified to submit because we were able to identify the 100 parking spaces. And the disadvantage we have in the possibility of getting the grant is the fact that we are competing against cities that are trying to rehabilitate their parks. On the other hand, it's purchasing a park of 50 acres, which isn't really that common wherever you go, whether it's in a city or not. And so I think that's part of the judgment that they're needing to make at the state level is that 50-acre park worth the state's money to put into it? And I really don't see the extent of the restriction that Bob has described as actually being requirements in what we do on the property.
Ken, do we know how many people or towns, municipalities have applied for this grant?
No.
There's no way,
No.
I guess my question is, I mean, what we're hearing is that to get into this, to be considered for the application, the only thing that, the only hurdle we had to jump over was to show we could provide the 100 spaces of parking. That's a different discussion for what requirements are you encumbering yourself with if you accept.
Yeah, so
That's a whole different discussion.
Yeah, so I think at the very least, the fact that this was brought up this evening, I think Ken probably an opportunity to do some advanced recon and flesh this out to get an understanding.
Okay.
Because what I was going to say, what I was further going to say was, that's one example of potentially a startup cost, right? I presume, I know there's a number of buildings.
Wait a minute, what do you mean by it? You mean paving every trail?
No,
absolutely, because I would say absolutely not.
The parking lot, right?
No.
Whether it's graded smooth, whether there's
No.
riprap put down, whether it's asphalt,
No.
there's some startup costs.
I would say no.
Okay.
Now, I will admit that when we were there after the rain that you guys had at the end of October, there were a couple of puddles in the lot that in the 4 hours that we were there subsided quite a bit. So it might be reasonable to put a truckload or something of stuff to spread around there, but it does not need to be paved.
The other thing, what about swimming? Because you mentioned in here, no testing was done in the water. Yeah.
No testing has been done since 2013.
I don't know anything about
But
what you have to do and how much that costs, and if you have to remediate that. I'm just asking, just because it was
Also,
in here, I don't want
I guess you've heard me enough times in the past, talk about this, and you've clearly, done your homework on what it's gonna take to buy it, the idea of potentially getting a grant, and then factoring in the debt costs, and even evaluating the annual maintenance costs. I presume that you've gone to the various departments, areas to get and ferret this out and assess this. What I would say is, the unfortunate thing is, you've brought up a lot of great ideas around, we could do this, we could do that, it all depends upon what the town. There's a group of folks that have been very passionate about bringing this up. And the sense is, it's, here you go. Town figured out, once you buy it, then then you gotta figure out what it's gonna cost, what you may have to deal with, and then how to figure out how to make revenue. I would have loved a more comprehensive package to say, not only are we really passionate about the town buying this, but here is our game plan to tell you and to show you the roadmap to exactly how this makes all the sense in the world and how we see utilizing this.
Right, could be a
And that-
one-time cost thing,
Yeah, the
you know.
back of the page on the operating costs is at least some of the uses that we would see possible at the beginning and/or as time goes along. I've alluded to some of them, and some of these can be done soon, and some of these would take a little bit longer to have occur, but those are the sorts of things.
The buildings, because we don't actually own the property, I assume that our building inspector hasn't been able to go in and review to assess the buildings.
We had a couple of people who went with the facilities manager, the Girl Scouts, went through it. One of them, a local developer engineer who made some preliminary assessments. So we have a sense that there are half a dozen or so buildings that are in very good condition and that could be quite useful to the various uses that we have in that. And then conclusions that some of the other ones, that was not necessarily the case. There's nothing that's falling down. Everything has locks on it.
Yeah.
And in fact, one of the things that surprises me the most is that although the camp has been closed now for 4 years, there's virtually no vandalism to any of the buildings.
Well, is there anything there to vandalize?
Does that stop people from vandalizing? I don't think so. Who knows? There has been some stuff in some parts of it. So there's a sense that some of the buildings can be used the way they are. But I think part of this management committee that I'm talking about, I would want to have look very carefully at each one and really make hard judgments as to both how you would use it and therefore what you would need to do to either fix a building, or if not, then take it down and decide if you wanted to put something else there or not put something else there. But again, I don't think this is something that has to happen tomorrow or next year or the year after that. If you don't have the money for it, then you wouldn't do it. But you can still use the land.
Joe?
Ken, I was just wondering, this may be an impossible thing to calculate, but what would the cost of the town be if we didn't pick up these 50 acres, if they were developed? How many houses would go on? How many children would be added to the school system? And would that be offset by tax revenues? I mean, this is a sizable chunk and a very desirable piece of property.
The
I'll
highest,
second that question.
the highest and best use plan in the appraisals was for 10 or 11 houses, depending on which lot you actually chose to use. Caveat in that is that those were, because of, when you do highest and best use, you're looking at, the cost. And so It doesn't include doing a subdivision road through there because that road would be costly. So the houses that they proposed were for 3 common driveways, 2 coming in off of Hudson Road and 1 coming in off of Long Hill.
Yeah, can you show me on the map, your map, exactly with 2?
All right, so while that's going
Yeah,
on,
it's the,
Bob,
that's right there. It's the 2 bump ins on
The
the,
bump ins?
by Hudson
I want to
Road.
make a comment about, you're
Okay.
talking about the buildings that are already on spot.
yep,
If we start using those buildings, and they are not ADA compliant, which they clearly are not from the pictures, we could be sued for discrimination. So either we use those buildings, if we're going to use those buildings, it's going to cost money to make them ADA compliant, or we're not going to use those buildings. Now, I don't know what those buildings are for. If there are interior facilities that we're expecting to use, those interior facilities will have to be remodeled to be ADA compliant also. Again, everything the town has now is ADA compliant, and anything we acquire would, by state law, have to be ADA compliant in order to be used.
well, my concern is just not even using them, just as they are, right? If we open it up and let anyone go in there,
Is an
To what-
attractive nuisance.
well, just the condition of the buildings, are they absolutely okay? Can they remain boarded up? Are there any issues with
Yeah,
even having people around them?
we don't know.
So,
I've been very involved with the Complete Streets grant program,
yeah,
so I feel the need to make sure that we're absolutely clear on something. The Complete Streets program that we're working on is targeted for 117, the corridor for 117, effectively from, I would say, from the 495 overpass to Still River Road, in essence. There's never been any conversation about sidewalks going from the center of town to Hudson Road as part of the Complete Streets program. There's never even been a concept to talk about that. So I want to make sure advisory is absolutely clear that there are no plans within the Complete Streets construct at all to include any sidewalks from the center of town out to Hudson Road. And, I mean, I'm a former grant writer. I did it for a living for 7 years. When a grant awarding agency sees a comment in a grant application, they expect it to be true. And I'm troubled that that statement is in the grant application, and there's nothing that can be tied back to any town activities that support that.
all right. So you had me up there to a certain point, Tom, but then you lost me. So it was, when Bob brought that up, it was my understanding that if we went forward, because of the park grant, if we went forward, we would then fall into that compliance. Is that what you're saying?
Well, that's a totally separate thing. Bob's talking about ADA compliance on the property.
You know,
And he's-
Sidewalk. The sidewalk
And he's
is-
correct. The sidewalk is a separate, I mean, the sidewalk isn't being mentioned in the construct of the ADA study that we're going to be doing. It's a matter of, the grant says the sidewalk is going to go from point A to point B. If you build the sidewalk, if we create the sidewalk, it must be ADA compliant.
yeah,
No question about
exactly.
that.
But
Yes.
it's in the grant, that's at
It's
the
in the
top.
grant, that is part of the Complete Streets program, that a sidewalk will, and it doesn't say may, it says will.
I think where I'm even getting confused on this. We are in the Complete Streets program,
Yes.
but there is no plan to put a sidewalk in anywhere.
That's what I'm saying.
So any reference to the Complete Streets program mentioning a sidewalk is completely incremental to what we're currently doing.
Yes.
Okay. That, all
Yes.
right. Thank you.
Can I go back to Joe's point? There's been a lot of debate around the town recently about what it costs to educate a student. I'm not sure why, but there has been. But I think the conventional wisdom is that if you have more than 2 kids in a house, then it doesn't pay for itself. So I think that you're not likely to make money by, the town is not likely to make money by developing houses there.
So anyway, 10 to, whether a kid is a moneymaker or not, 10 to 11 houses, 2 to 3 kids, we're talking 20 to 30 kids added to the school system.
If it were that, if it were that, but that's too high a number, I guess, is the point.
What do you disagree with?
I think you take a number of houses, and then you need to have some data to show of those houses, how many people have children. There's a lot of people on our street, no kids. Then once you decide, data show how many children, how many of them go to public school? Our neighbors here and there, Catholic school, go up to Harvard, and then you look at the variable cost of that student. If you have a standard capacity of the school is here, and the current population is here, you add somebody, and you're just paying a variable cost. All the fixed costs are sunk. You gotta buy some books and stuff, but you aren't hiring staff and overhead and all that kind of thing. So I understand conventional wisdom, but I would love to see some numbers.
Right. The town clerk's office actually did such a study, because I had heard the conventional wisdom as well, and I didn't believe it to be accurate, and it's not. In fact, there are, as of July 2017, 1,929 total available housing units in Bolton, within which 330 have 2 kids or more. And put another way, less than 1 in 5 houses in town have 2 kids or more. Or put another way, about 89% of, about 83% of the houses don't have 1 child or less. And then you take a subset of that, because again, Ted is absolutely right. Some go to charter school, some go to Catholic school, some go school choice out, some are homeschooled, so that number becomes smaller after that.
There's also demographic studies that have been done, one most notably from the school committee, that shows the demographic trend is going to be flat or lower. So the people move, and frankly, that's one of the big issues I raise about updating the master plan. So we can't accept it as conventional anymore, and I appreciate the argument. It's something we really need to vet more carefully.
Bolton, for many years, has been a member of the Metropolitan Area Planning Commission, MAPIC, and earlier this month in November, they released a report specifically addressing the question of housing starts and population growth. Their study takes place from 2006 on, and the results of that study are that there is no longer any correlation between housing starts and student population. The reason for the break is that and they go into great detail on this, is that the baby boomer generation, which drove that trend, is no longer, they're past the age of bearing children. Yeah. Right? So that connection that we've all sort of gotten used to has been broken for at least 10 years. It's not a reliable, it's not correct to make that assumption anymore. The one example they give, the couple of dramatic examples they give, is Hopkinton during the study period had its housing stock increased by 19%. Their student population stayed flat.
Yeah.
On the other hand, Revere's population went up around 15%, but they had no increase in housing at all. So that relationship is broken, and we shouldn't be using that as a wedge between the conservation efforts and the school anymore.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to say that you're saving the town money by buying the land. I'm saying that you destroy the land to build houses on it, and that there's a benefit to the town to owning the land, that it's not like anything else that we have, period.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Could you just tell us which boards and committees the Camp Virginia group has met with, and what recommendations, if any, those boards and committees have had with respect to the proposal?
Nobody's made any recommendations. We met with capital planning in early October, and I think I may have mentioned it in what we sent to you, but we actually the departments are supposed to submit on things, so that,
What'd you think of
for no
those?
other reason, they're
He
okay.
used
I mean,
the,
it's,
he used the old one.
Oh, all right, forget about
oh,
it.
yeah, the new one wasn't available at the time, and I wanted to use the one that, that was current that they had. So we had a reasonable discussion with them. We met with Parks and Rec. We met with Conservation some time ago in advance of when the grant went in, but until last week they hadn't met for quite a while anyway, so there really wasn't an opportunity to sit down with them. But we haven't really had any endorsements or lack thereof from anyone. It's mostly been information in both directions from them.
Okay. Sam?
Hey, Mr. Chairman, to come back to a point that you had made earlier, and I think on one level, Ken is correct that, to access and use the property, there really aren't going to be startup costs. But in looking at the list, I'd say a good number of these things can't be done unless there's some capital that's done and improvement done to the property, especially the money-making ones.
Agreed.
So I think, because we've had this discussion before about, it's only going to cost $10 for this, but then there's all this other cost that no one ever really talks about. So, it's just not spending the money for the property. It's there will be some costs depending upon what is decided we want to do with this piece of property, or what improvements need to be made in order to be able to do some of this stuff. And I think to your point, it would be good to have some idea of what some of these potential costs are if we go down this path.
Yeah.
Because when we could leave the property exactly the way it is, but you're not going to get much of this stuff. I think no one's really talked about. There's a lot of cleanup, and I think that's been downplayed a little bit. I don't think they've removed a single stump on the property. Some of that's going to have to be done, and I don't know. I think it was even stated that in a short article in the newspaper the week before last. And again, I don't think you know whether the Girl Scouts are going to be doing any stump removal. So I mean, there is going to be some additional cost associated with this, whether we do it now or whether we do it later. But I think some of this needs to, because we can't say, oh, we're going to have weddings there. I don't think anybody in their right mind is going to want a wedding on that property the way it's.
No, certainly not the way it is now, no question about it.
So,
Yeah.
but what is it going to take to get there?
Yeah, no, that's a valid point. And there's certainly cleanup that needs to be done, and I think a lot of that can be done. The stumps are a different matter, and I think that's something that we'd want to address. I think a lot of the stumps you could leave and they would just be grown up around and you'd never notice them after a while. There may be some that are in the way, in which case they could be cleared out. To really make the trails usable is going to require getting some of the wood that they left around it off, and I think one thing we could do would be to invite residents to come in and take wood off of there. That's a no-cost thing, but we'd even help the residents. And so I think that's something that could certainly be done as well. But there's no question that that work would need to be done in order for some of those uses to be done. Though those uses are long-term as much as anything else. And it's also true that you wouldn't be generating income if you weren't doing some of those things, but you would still have the land that was available for people if they wanted.
Ms. Regan?
Yes. So Ken and the Camp Virginia group did meet with us right before the Halloween parade a couple weeks ago. And one of the issues that the commission had with the plan was just a lack of detail, which I know has been discussed quite a bit. But one point I wanted to bring up was the 9 hours of employee help. So I've been speaking to Town of Clinton Parks and Rec Director, because we've been exploring possibly looking at somebody to come in and run it as a full-time position, purely just exploring it at this point. because our commission has said that it feels that the way we are now and the events that we have is getting outside of what a volunteer group can manage. So the 9 hours a week, or 9 hours in total, that Ken had proposed, we pushed back on. Basically, that's one day, that's one work day. When I spoke to the director in Clinton, she said a lot of people try to go part-time, but really to have a full program, you would need a full-time person, especially with what Bolton is looking to do. They just completed a formal salary survey and job description exercise. And for the Parks and Rec director, it's $29.11 for minimum, and it was $35.45 maximum per hour for 40 hours a week. So the 9 hours and $20 per hour is awfully low.
Yeah, OPEB and everything else considered.
And I have the full survey, I can circulate it if anybody wants it.
Right. Yeah, that'd be great if you could send that to us.
Was anyone here at the start of this meeting to listen to the fire department asking for $90,000?
So that's my thoughts too,
All right.
two more full-time too.
Ken, it was
I
reported
understand
there
that's a
are
problem.
50 feet of shoreline. Is that a good number?
No, it's more like 300. There's 50 feet, there's 50 feet that is currently, well, I think it's more than 50 feet, but there's an open area that has been swung from, that has a dock that's been pulled off that we would either decide to refloat or get rid of. And then there's a sort of a brushed area to the right of that, as you look at the water, that goes on for 2 or 3 times that length. So it's about 300 feet, so it's a lot more than what's there right now. But what's there right now is certainly usable.
Has anybody run the numbers to demolish all the improvements and just return it to nature?
No.
Eliminate all these labor costs and
No.
just have trails?
No, and a decision that the group made in the spring, when we were deciding to apply for the grant, was whether to apply for the land grant, which was for conservation land, or to apply for the parkland grant. And we ended up choosing to go for the parkland grant for the reasons that are really shown on the matrix there of the various multiple uses, that there were a lot of things that you could do with what was there, with the parkland grant, and still do some of the passive ones on the part of the property that you could. If you went for the land grant, then what you said would have to happen, that everything would have to come out. When the woman walked around the property with us, she pointed that out to us, that all of the structures would have had to have been removed, all the electricity, all of the water, everything would have had to have been taken out. And we decided that that was not what the town needed, that what the town needed was a park, and that the things that were there were a better way to start it, and the ability to use it for active recreation and other things than just hiking and snowshoeing would be a good idea, and that's why it was. We knew that it was a risk to apply under the urban program, but we believe that we have met the requirements to do that. I should mention, for future, because it would involve any of the rehabs to buildings or whatever it is, there's a small town park grant program. And it's a smaller amount of money total, and it's also a smaller amount of money per grant, only $50,000. But there are a smaller number of small towns, so there's very little demand for it. So there's not much competition. 50,000 would not buy very much as far as land is concerned. So it's not intended to buy land, it's intended to make improvements. So I would envision one of these long-range plan things is to figure out exactly when you would do things, would factor in every so often maybe being able to get a $50,000 grant to rehabilitate the dining hall or whatever it was. So I think that's one of the sources of funding that would exist, would be that grant program. To my knowledge, the town has never used that, and I think that is definitely available, and we were told that we would be quite competitive in that because it really isn't used by very many people.
if one wanted to get a better understanding of the obligations of this grant, where would we find that? Is that in the grant, if we read that?
The grant application
Grant
talks about
application.
most of that stuff, and
Is that on the town website, or?
it's on the state's website. If you go
State
to,
website?
if you go to the Division of Conservation Services, then it's, the information is split under the park grant and the land grant. And I guess what I would say about the ADA is, to the extent that we can, that we would build trails on the flat part, they would certainly be done in such a way that people could use them. But we never had any plans, nor got the impression from anybody that it would be necessary on a hillside in the woods to pave a trail just because you bought it with parkland money. Maybe we'll be proven wrong, but I certainly don't.
Can you
I've not
apply
gotten
the
that impression.
parkland money just to the part that has the improvements and leave the trail part, not a park, call it something else,
Why would you do it, I guess is the question.
to avoid expensive paving trails?
Oh, if you had to do that, probably you could, yes. I mean, well, that would depend on their interpretation. I mean, we, in the map that you have there in yellow, that's on this sheet that you might have had before, but this one.
Well, the
That's
article
what
is
was
written
applied
for
for.
one purchase, not two.
Yeah.
That's right, it's a single purchase, and so it can't be split in that way.
Ken, I remember when this first got started, there was a woman from the Sudbury Valley Trust that
Right.
was
Yeah.
helping the town try and figure this out. And
And she went out for a while, and they provided another person who has also been similarly helpful.
So I presume that's the reason why, could you just speak a little bit to why the town of Bolton is considering purchasing this? The Sudbury Valley Trust built a conservation restriction, and why them, not Bolton Conservation Trust? But even to that, maybe you're not the right person. But is there an advantage to one organization holding a conservation trust over another? Why wouldn't Bolton want to hold that? Or more importantly, why does Sudbury Valley want to hold it?
I'm not exactly sure. That was the way that we set it up. They have a lot of experience with this sort this would be a more complicated conservation restriction because of what's on the hillside versus what isn't. And we've had some discussions with them about how it could be divided up and things of that sort. There's no particular reason one or another would have it. What I would say in this case is that if you view being the holder of a conservation restriction as a good thing.
I have no
I
idea
know,
if
but
it's good or bad.
If you do, then it seems to me they deserve it because they did all the heavy lifting on this. Bolton Conservation Trust didn't. Either could be the holder, they could both be the holder, and that could be left for later on. But that's the way that this was written, just because at the time, that's what we were figuring would be the way that it would work, and that's who we've done all of our work with on planning it and figuring out what would be done, what they could contribute and do this, that, and the other. I mean, they've done a fantastic job in what they've done, and so that's the way that it was written, but it could certainly be changed if that's needed.
Yeah, just to embellish on that, I attended a Conservation Commission meeting last week. They invited me in, they had a discussion about this very topic. I guess it's one thing for the grant application to have SVT because you needed somebody as a placeholder. But the article itself, the wording of the article, not the summary, but the wording of the article states that SVT holds the conservation restriction. Both the Conservation Commission and the Bolton Conservation Trust would prefer that the CR, conservation restriction, be held by the Bolton Conservation Trust. Conservation Commission can't hold it because it's town-owned land, so it would need to be held by the trust. They have gone as far as, to my understanding, draft an amendment which they will be offering on town meeting floor. So their preference is for the trust to hold the conservation restriction. There may not necessarily be, an advantage or disadvantage either way, but at least with the Conservation Trust, it's an entity that's a little bit closer to home, as opposed to an entity that really has they have no financial interest in this property. I know when we first were looking at the property over a year ago, and I believe I wrote a letter to the editor clearing up some items, and we printed excerpts from the minutes of one of the meetings where we talked about this. Originally, the SVT was supposed to do fundraising, which hasn't occurred. And to my knowledge, there is no contribution of money. And certainly, very grateful that that they helped the ad hoc committee, ad hoc group, with the grant application. But I think their strong preference, both the commission and the trust, is for the trust to hold the CR on this.
Jonathan?
I'd just say that Sudbury Valley trustees brought this deal to the town.
Yep.
They had the relationships, they provided the technical assistance. Nobody locally, the trust didn't do that. So it seems to make sense. They've been in on the deal from the beginning for them to request that. So I don't see it as unusual. They're a great organization. They're working with towns like Boylston. I don't know if anybody's been over to Summer Star, but they're working with towns all over, and they're not like a suspicious foreign organization. They're doing great work everywhere.
No, Ken has explained it very well.
I don't want to speak for anybody, but my impression is that this is still in a state of flux.
Yeah, I'm just, it just seemed interesting to me, and I remember the starting of it, and how it all came to be.
Yep.
And I would say that,
If the Conservation Trust had been involved in, particularly to the extent that Sudbury Valley has in putting this together, then there wouldn't have even been any question in their being listed in there.
they're still working on.
But they were working on other things, and I understand that, and they understand that, and it's not really a problem. But that'll be dealt with one way or the other between now and or at the town meeting, and it'll be whatever it is.
Let's just be clear. The ad hoc committee doesn't really have the authority to determine who the holder of the CR is. And the ad hoc committee didn't discuss this with the selectmen, nor the question I asked the Conservation Commission, nor was it really even thoroughly discussed with them. I can't speak for the Bolton Conservation Trust because they didn't have a member there. But, the town is buying the land.
Stan, I'm not saying the town is not buying the land. All I'm saying is that, from what I understand, between the trust and the commission, it's not a given right now that they would be putting forth the amendment. I don't have anything that says no.
They took a vote and they don't have another meeting scheduled, so the only way, they would have to have another meeting to revoke that.
Well,
that's fine, but all I'm saying is it's not I or the group that is saying this. I would let the trust speak for the trust, and if you guys want to put in an amendment, then let the town decide. It's absolutely the town's, no question about it. But, we drafted the language in the citizens petition, and it had SVT in it, so that's all I can say. But that isn't deciding, that's just putting forward to the town for them to vote on it.
No.
Briefly, back 15 minutes when we were talking about prospective uses of the property in the future, and the issue came up as to whether or not a comprehensive proposal for revenues out for the next 10 years might have been more compelling as part of the presentation. We made a conscious decision as a group that doing such a thing would be sufficiently speculative, that was so dependent upon, you know, do we invest in this or that or the other kinds of facilities and so forth, that it made more sense to talk about the property as the bare bones as currently existed, and then consider opportunities down the road, put forth reasoned proposals for incremental improvements, and have the town, the boards, everyone involved in the process of deciding yay or nay on each of these propositions. And rather than throwing everything on the wall now and looking like we're making a $60 million commitment for the next 20 years to put improvements in there, we felt that it was more responsible and realistic to give a bare bones existing facilities type of proposal with the acknowledgement that the opportunity for additional investment would be there, that there were possible sources of aid to fund such things from whether it's another park grant or other resources, and
Sure.
that they should each be considered as they come forth.
Yeah, no, and I can absolutely see that approach, and I get it. It's just, I look at it the other way, you too, right? I mean, if I'm gonna,
We have to,
Right?
because that's why we're here.
yeah, I mean, if I'm gonna
And I've done a
buy,
lot of business plans over the years, and
yeah,
I know what's involved in projecting out, and it's nice, but on the other hand, you gotta get into business before you can realize those things. So we just felt it was more transparent to start with the bare bones and show that there was upside to the possibility here, but that it made sense at a minimalist kind of investment.
right. So, you know, we've extended this a little bit longer than originally planned, but I think it was a good discussion. Unless there's anything further, you know, I think this was a good opportunity to ask more questions, and I think hopefully some of these questions that were asked, it allows you guys the opportunity to kind of fine tune the message on town meeting floor. So thank you for coming in and sharing this with us. So the rest of the evening is really boring advisory business. So that's, yeah, get out of here. No, I'm kidding.
Thank you.
When I was on advisory, it wasn't boring.
No, it's my cell dropping. Get everyone to leave. So we're not far behind you.
Good evening, everyone. This is
Good evening. Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
Have a nice evening. So I think first order of business, we've got some meeting minutes, so Brian, we can just take a few minutes. We've brought this up before, but could you just share with everyone the change in meeting minutes as you came across at one of the state meetings?
Yeah, so I mean, I think the most important one has to do with the timing, which is that now there's a regulation that requires that meeting minutes be approved and, posted either within your next 3 meetings, or I think it's 90 days, whichever is later. But the best practice is to, especially when we're in our busy season, will be to try to approve minutes as close as we can to the last meeting, because otherwise,
Can't remember.
like when we get to March and we're trying to approve January, we're gonna be like, yeah, what was going on?
Yeah.
So since Ken is no longer on advisory, I'm just kind of like, I'll take the minutes for however long we want, and I've asked Linda to just put it on every agenda that we can review the ones from the prior meeting. So I think it's just the 3 of us.
Right.
Yeah.
The last set.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's, so it'll be on every agenda moving forward.
We used to do it that way.
Yeah, and the problem is, the hard part is, as you guys take a look at the last 2 pages, and I think I've shared this with all of you at this point, the game plan is gonna be slightly different for this year. We do plan to meet in December, so you've already heard some things that we have to get added to the agenda. One is the official vote, and again, guys, I was going back and forth. I'm like, holy cow, we've got a busy night. We're gonna have we're gonna interview these 2 people, and then I'm sure we're gonna wanna talk a little bit about it, but we go right to the discussion. We can talk about it now, but, one, I didn't want them to think that they had to hold on to the end of the night. Conversely, it would have been nice to use this next month to whoever we choose to get them slightly up to speed and ready for December, given what we're gonna do at December's meeting. But then,
Should we want to vote on it?
Will
Well,
that discussion be executive session?
It should
so
be.
that
well, no,
we're
it,
It
so,
never has been.
talking in front of the whole town?
yeah, so one, it has to be open meeting. So I checked with Dawn, right? It has to be open
And
meeting.
it's embarrassing, kind of.
Exactly, because I'm like, we're going to be voting for a person. Maybe someone will disagree, and then then the person is going to be sitting right there, right?
Right, and in front of all these people.
Yeah, but, Dawn just cut off the whole discussion, and he just said, Brad, you never
It has to be put on the.
you never had it on the agenda, so you can't vote tonight anyways. So I'm like,
Oh,
holy cow.
that's true.
So
I forgot.
that was my fault. But again, I don't know. So that's the deal with that. We can have a discussion. I mean, the meeting is still open.
Sorry.
So we can have a
Are
discussion.
you saying the discussion of 2 candidates has to be an open
An
meeting?
open meeting?
The discussion have to be, or the vote have?
Not that they're both great. I mean,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
just shades of
But
difference.
it's on.
It's-
I
But
know them both.
But it's on air.
I don't want somebody to hear part of a sentence or something.
Yeah, so you know what?
We all have to declare it executive, then we have to all declare it unexecutive. I think vote by vote, you're gonna go around and it's.
Yeah, so yeah, you know what?
But maybe it has
So
to be on the agenda, I don't know.
No,
I
Don
think
said
the
it has to
vote
be on
has
the
to be.
agenda.
The official
probably-
vote
The
does.
official
The vote can
the
be
discussion
public, I don't
does
have a
not.
problem with that.
I don't
Yeah.
think the discussion.
Or
has to
it could be secret ballot too.
I
We gotta
think,
check.
so
No,
I
it
think.
can't be secret ballot.
So I believe that this would fall under the category of things that are appropriate for executive session, at least the
Okay.
discussion.
Yes.
The vote would have to be an open session, but I think Brad's right that whether we have the discussion or the vote, we have to have them both on the
Yeah,
agenda.
it has
So
to
maybe
be.
for next meeting, we have basically an executive session.
Scheduled
and we can,
right on the
we can
meeting.
even say what it's about, it's to
Right.
discuss,
Yeah.
and then we'll come out and vote.
Sounds good.
That sounds like a good thing.
And the voting would be.
So we can have the
public,
executive
Or
session.
would it be
Public.
a
Yeah,
secret
yeah.
ballot?
It's
No,
public.
it can't. It has to be.
Okay, all right. I can-
So
That's hard.
we'll do the
No, it's
executive,
hard.
we'll do the executive session right at the beginning,
Yep.
Mhm.
and then we'll come, is that, you guys
Sounds
good with
good.
that? So that's the deal. Going back to Brian's point and taking a look at the last 2 pages, right? We've switched this up slightly. The first 3 weeks of January are gonna really not be fun, but assuming things go well, meaning no snowstorms, right? We are gonna be done, we will be through the budget by the 3rd week in January. I foresee, a snowstorm here or there, right? So, but the bottom line is, we will be 90, if not 100% done by the first part of February, and then we'll go back to once a week on Tuesdays. We will still be busy, we'll be working on our letter. I thought the ideas, if you guys remember when we closed down the last meeting we had right after the annual town meeting and we were talking about the presentation, I thought there was a lot of really good ideas. I think we have the opportunity to continue, just like we're doing with the GFOA, continually refining, bringing forth new info, making it available to everyone. That's what the GFOA is having us go through. But the presentation, I thought there was a lot of good opportunity to continually advance and change that story and add on additional stuff into that presentation. So we'll need time for that.
What do you think is the earliest that our liaison people could meet with their designated department or committee? Because the quality of the presentation at the budget session in January, if it has numbers and avoids conventional wisdom and avoids notions and narratives, it'll go a lot faster, quicker.
Yeah, so I'm glad you asked that question because it allows me to, again, explain to Brian that I am not ignoring you, that I have just not gotten around. He and I were having a conversation the other day about exactly that, Ted, on when do we think it's a good time to get in front of
And we need to give
the chief.
warning to,
Exactly.
not warning, notice.
Yeah, so, because we were trying to figure out when we can meet with the chief, because we thought by meeting with him last year in advance, when he was in front of, everyone here, it seemed to go slightly smoother and a little bit faster, and we had some idea what was going on. And I think we came to the consensus that, these guys, these department heads should be allowed to submit the budget, as is. How it's their budget, they submit it. If I remember correctly, it's due back to Dawn by the 21st. So I would say November. So I would say when everyone comes back from Thanksgiving break, if you feel compelled to want to reach out to the various department heads at your liaison, I think that's fair.
Yeah, I'm going to touch base with DPW pretty soon.
So.
Well, now, I noticed that you and I are the liaisons for ambulance and fire, and they have to reach out to us, or we have to reach out to them a little sooner, since they have this.
Tonight,
Yeah. So, and that's it, I have always taken the tact that, we made it aware to the various department heads. And if they want our assistance, they can reach out to us. But at the same time, you know what? Last year, we did take a proactive stance, at Brian's, moving forward with this, and we didn't wait for the chief. We called him. And so I think it's one of those things where, it's the same feeling as, getting an email. Like, I get 200 emails a day, and I get hung on something. This was provided to you in an email back in June of 2000, right? So I think it's fair. Like, we don't have to take the laissez-faire attitude.
Right.
Like, if you feel compelled that you want to know more, or you think, hey, I think if I want to make sure that this department, when they come in January, it's as smooth as can be, I'm going to make a phone call and so I think that's fair.
I think the earlier we get involved with them, and if they go ahead and prepare a presentation, and then we say, well, we need more, and then they got to replow the same field again, and doesn't make for happy people. So, if we're early, do it once and do it
See where the line
the best way we all.
So are you guys saying, I'm pretty confident that budgets are back to Dawn by the 21st. So so Monday, the 27th, that's right after Thanksgiving, you guys, we all can reach out to the various departments, and then we're gonna meet on December 12th. So that gives us, 2 weeks to get out and meet with the key departments. The idea for the 12th, granted, we're going to be voting on, we're going to add to the 12th agenda, but as of right now, the 12th, and this was Brian's idea, I thought it was a great one, is we're going to have the entire budget, and it's just going to be us, and we're just going to kind of go through it and say, oh, hey, let's talk DPW. Oh, you know what? This line item, we always dig in on this one, right? What is the deal? Let's, refresh our memory, or maybe, hey, Ted, between, now, like, on the 12th, even though you met with DPW last week,
Yeah.
can you follow up and try and get some clarity so when he comes in on, January
Yeah.
3rd?
Yeah.
Things like that. So we want to basically spend the 12th of December doing a very quick run-through of the budget and where are the potential pitfalls, roadblocks, whatever.
Sounds good.
Have a thought. We were talking earlier that the school budget is, what, 67% or
Yeah.
63? And that our domain is 37, but of that,
Yeah.
so much is labor.
Yep.
right? And I
think
think
it comes
we
to like
need
12%.
we need to unpack that. And I would propose that we invite whoever is in charge of implementing town policy relative to salaries and wages, come and tell us, what is that policy? Show us the written policy, and how well are we conforming to our own policy? Just a meeting of understanding.
Yeah.
I've asked for that
Because
for years.
that, the long-term planning report that Pat was talking about, the first three things that the survey revealed is people among those first three was something about, we need to constrain taxes. We need to make sure that we're getting value. And,
Well,
I just don't think we can say hands off. We have to.
No. So
things over time.
I partially know the answer. It's
Well,
Don Lowe and it's the selectmen.
But I want to see the written policy.
I don't know if there is one.
Well,
It's a function of.
Let's unpack it. That's why I'm being totally optimistic and naive that yes, there is, and we're following it. But let's see the
I thought I was
present.
that in establishing a salary, or a wage even, they compare us to comparable
It's a comparison,
towns,
yeah.
right? It's a comparison. They go by that.
But it's
not
not
too
for
sure.
us to. I don't want to guess
No
what
one
they're
gets
doing. And
by merit.
I've been on the
Yes,
side where
no.
you're comparing to get some results you want. And,
But we just want to understand.
Yeah, we
what's
just want to
happening.
understand, and that's the first thing, and maybe we'll just cheer them on, hey, great job, I don't know. I have no preconceived notions, I just want to understand, because it is large, and I think that we owe the town, here's how you're 37%, because I don't know, you had on the top of your head last year, I think, what percentage of that we are really,
Yeah, I think it's like 8 or,
10% of the
I think,
budget.
yeah, I think it's like 8, yeah.
It's not much.
It's like,
10%
8 or 12, somewhere, yeah, it's in there.
And here we are, we're fretting over $100 here and this and
I
that, and the big,
Yeah, the fact of the matter is, it is a big, so let's just go the other side of the house. 68%, we can't control, right? And of that, right, how much is that? And again, until, this is Massachusetts, this is every state, until there is a change from the top down around, compensation of teachers, right, and how it's constructed, right? Does it make sense in this day and age for a brand new person to walk in and get a pension for the rest of their life?
well, you
Right?
just segued into my other thought, is that in our town, we have pensions, and have we ever considered, 401Ks or
I don't think we
defined
can. I think you cannot do it.
Right,
You
but
cannot do it.
defined contribution versus.
That's my point.
all that.
That's
Have
my
we ever
point.
considered?
That's my
We-
point,
we
Ted.
can't.
We can't.
We can't.
When I say it's a story from the top down, it's at the state level, and in some cases, I'd say the federal level, right? But do I humbly believe that we should evaluate a teacher just like we do a corporate person and say, when you do a great job, you're gonna get you're gonna get paid. You're gonna get, none of this, you're in a union.
No one
and
is
you're
talking
gonna
about
get
changing
Oh, you've been
any
here for
existing
10
thing, but
years,
if we
10
feel that, we should be more in tune with you know. the
We
rest
can't
of
be into
the people.
with industry
Then-
until and unless the whole state
I don't
structure,
think
we've
Stony
got
Brook
civil
can.
service,
I-
we've
I
got,
think that,
no, that's,
you know, we could make a case and
well,
go to our rep.
There was a no, you're absolutely right.
I-
Individually, we can absolutely go to our reps. I will share a very quick story. I
We
think I-
passed a resolution last year.
Quick.
The selectmen passed a
We're in
resolution
town hall
last
here.
year
Yeah,
having to do with, I forget the subject, but it was way out of what a town government would do. It was either something environmental or...
well, it was the
energy.
green, it was making us a green community.
Yeah.
And
There
that's
was
fine,
something-
but there was no cost to it. And I'm saying this because I don't think
There
I'm
was
speaking
something.
out of turn here, but I helped edit a letter that individuals are sending to the selectmen, urging them to pass a resolution saying that we, as a community, are committed to the Paris Accords.
Yeah.
And now, that has nothing to do,
Nothing
it
to
doesn't
do with
affect,
anything.
but
and
it's just,
What I'm talking about is has more application. So if we're willing to send a letter to the governor and X number of people in Boston on the Paris Accord, we should be willing, or potentially willing, you know, the selectmen to sign a letter saying, you know, we have quantified the cost of this policy and it'd be our suggestion that it be consideration be given to change it.
yeah.
That would change
That's-
people.
I mean,
No, and
Just
because
sitting here
it
and
is,
saying.
no, I
"Help
understand,
us," I
but
do not
that,
accept it.
that's a great point. I'll leave it on that, that that it's gonna take the governor, it's gonna take the.
Not just the
at-
governor.
At the level.
It's gonna take 300 towns or 150 towns
Yeah,
to do the
but
same
it was
thing.
done in the state of, in the state of Rhode Island, that they changed the way it's done, but it was with the treasurer and the governor. And the treasurer who implemented it is now the governor. But
Two quick things. The first is, in terms of us getting our questions to you two for follow-up with the fire and ambulance,
yeah,
I assume that if we individually email you our questions, that's fine.
yeah,
Right?
exactly.
Because, yeah, one of the things in particular I want to understand is I know ambulance has a scheduling coordinator, and I just like to understand like how that person has been used to try to resolve this issue. But the other thing I was going to say is, don't we tonight have to vote on Camp Virginia, or at least make our recommendation?
oh yeah, I think we do.
Because
we aren't gonna meet
we
again until
have
the
to-
town-
I thought it said we were gonna do it on town
Yeah,
floor.
town
Oh, we're gonna do it on-
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay.
Mhm.
Or we could do it 5 minutes before the town meeting.
Is there a reason not
Or
to
we
do
could
it
do it
tonight?
in December.
That
Well, I
Well,
haven't
no, we
done
can't do it in December because
Knowing what I know,
we're gonna miss we can't do it in December because the town meeting will have taken place.
oh,
Yeah.
that's the 27th, yeah,
Yes.
okay.
No, we either have to do it on the town meeting floor and have a meeting
It's in the
before
warrant as
that.
that, so,
Yep, it's in the warrant.
Oh, it isn't,
Council.
oh, okay, well then I think we can.
yeah. All right, so I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second?
All right?
I
Good
second
night.
it.
So we can't vote on that.